Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order, and I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Treaty 1 territory and the traditional homeland of the Métis Nation. My name is Carrie Linklater. I'm your chair today. To my immediate left is Linda McFadden. My far left, Mr. Maurice Theron. Our city assessor today is Michael Taylor, and our admin secretary is Michelle Neepin. We will be hearing applications for revision of the assessment roll in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision is requested have been described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. Statements that applicants or the assessor make at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to the matters must be sworn in. Be advised that comparison of assessments of properties are not considered evidence of market value by the board. The board is appointed annually by the City Council. It is independent of it and the city administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the board's decisions with respect to an application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or classification, or to the Court of Queen's Bench if the matter pertains to the application of exemptions from taxation. Should you wish to appeal, information on how to do so will be included with the order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the matters to be addressed with each applicant following the swearing in. We will then have the assessor's testimony followed by questions that the applicant may have, and then the applicant's testimony followed by questions. Each side will have an opportunity to summarize if they wish. Once all the evidence about an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The process will repeat for each item on the docket today. The session will close after all the applications have been heard, and the board will deliberate in private and make its decisions. You will receive the order by registered mail as soon as possible. And as information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will be part of the public record. Let's swear everybody in.
Do you swear in or affirm?
Doesn't matter.
Can you state your full name, please?
Mike Taylor?
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Can you state your full name,
Roger
please?
Giffel.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good morning, gentlemen. We're going to start with our first property at 2103 Portage Avenue. Mr. Taylor, if you'd like to begin.
Well, there's the non-cooperation penalty on this property.
Right.
Yeah. I believe the appellant's willing to accept the penalty on this property, and we have a verbal recommendation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you still
Do you want me to read in the
read
roll number
everything
and
into
stuff?
the docket, please? Thank you.
Sure. So the roll number is 0705 1238000, 2103 Portage Avenue, for the 2020 reassessment value. So yeah, like I said before, the burden of proof will be placed on the applicant for non-cooperation. Again, I believe the appellant is willing to accept the penalty, and we have a recommendation to reduce the value for 2021 to $585,000.
And on what basis?
Adjustment of the capitalization rate
From,
from 6.5% to 8%.
Wow.
and Mr. Neufeld, you're willing to accept the non-co-op?
I have no evidence one way or another, so we're no contest.
And you're willing to accept the reduction?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you very much. So, I'll put them on here. 585.
85.
property is going to be 35 Lakewood Boulevard.
Well, are you presenting on it as well?
I'll be presenting on the matters with the exception of Walmart. I think the first property on the docket there relates to the Walmart application.
Is that the same,
Same address.
same roll number?
It is, yeah.
Yeah, it's all the same roll number,
Yeah.
right?
Okay.
Going to be sworn in or affirmed? Sworn. Can you state your full name, please?
David Nishi Buckingham.
Do you swear that the evidence you're about to give this hearing will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I still swear.
If you'd like to proceed.
Sure. Okay. So I have just the one brief, since it is just one realty roll number, but there's two files. Whereas there's two appeals, I guess, in the property, as Mr. Reimer said. Mr. Nishi Beckingham is representing Walmart, whereas the rest of the property is with Mr. Reimer. But I only have the one, so. Yeah, so for file number 19-1859 is roll number 0600766200. The proposed reassessment value for 2020 is $40,604,000. We have numerous buildings on site for neighborhood shopping center here today. Years built ranging from 1966 all the way to 2007. Yeah, lots of square footage here. Moving over to my page 2, we see all the different subject property leases. This property has been compliant
I'm
with.
sorry, I didn't get a copy of your brief that you're reading from.
Let me get a copy. Did you not pick up your copy from the office?
No, I didn't know I could pick up a copy from the office.
You didn't know. I only have my file copy, so I don't know what, so just as long as you don't write on it.
Okay.
Or you know what, maybe there was only one, did you get the copy? by
I
any chance?
did, but there's two file numbers, so I expect there would have been two.
Yeah, I dropped off 6 copies instead of 5.
So I can get a copy later and I'll just make notes on a separate sheet here if I need to.
Sure, yeah.
Thank you. If you'd like to proceed.
Sure. So page 2 just shows again that they've been fully compliant with submitting the income expense questionnaires. In addition to all the subject property leases, we need some are going back as far as 2003. But again, those are listed there for your information. Rental comparables are included on page 3. Try to include comparables, similar in use, nature, and age to the subject property. In addition to the bottom 3, I've kind of tried to put in some larger format stores to compare to the Walmart that we'll be discussing really. So really for right now, we'll key in on those 3. And with Mr. Reimer later, we'll focus in on the other comparable properties listed above. So the bottom 3, we just have the Walmart on Portage Avenue in Unicity there. We have Canadian Tire on St. James and the Canadian Tire on McPhillips at Garden City Shopping Center. For right now, sorry, I'll get you guys to flip to page 7. So you can see the 5th one from the top, 5th premise from the top, the 97,197 square feet. That's the Walmart we'll be discussing with Mr. Nishi Beckingham here. It's been applied at a rental rate of $12.50 a square foot. It had been previously applied for the previous reassessment rent of $12 a square foot, I believe. I don't believe the other parameters are in discussion. Really, it's more just the rent we're looking at today. We'll get to all the other stuff later. Mr. Reimer. Just my page 11.
Sorry,
Yeah.
just one second, I'm just trying to find, oh, there it is there, okay, thank you. I just couldn't find that. Walmart, right?
David, I can send you the whole document
Oh, okay, great.
electronically later. too,
Perfect,
if you
great.
want. So page 11 just has some aerial photographs. In case you're unfamiliar with the subject there, just located at Lakewood and Fernmore. Several different pad sites there, several different buildings there.
Excuse me, is the Walmart the number 35?
Yes. Over
Bottom.
735 at the bottom.
Thank you.
And then again, just, I've included some income expense mailers here too, for the subject property. That's, again, I think mostly with Mr. Nishibekian, it's just the rent for the Walmart today we're discussing, so save the rest of my breath for when Carrie comes up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Did you have any questions on the assessor's statements?
No.
Thank you. Maurice? Did you have questions?
Well, I'm, okay, I see you applied 1250 here.
Yep.
For the, okay, now you're on your comparables, obviously there's a bunch there, but when I look at the ones at the bottom, Walmart, that's on the one in West Portage,
Yep,
is at 824.
that's correct.
And Canadian Tire $17.50 and $12. Now, how does that Portage Walmart compare with the one on Lakewood? Could you try and tell me? I know that's Lakewood is the former Target store, as far as I remember.
Yeah,
anyway.
Lakewood's a much, much older store. It was Target, it was Zellers, and before Zellers, I believe it was something else, completely different. I can't comment specifically on the subject lease for either. I just know that there's lots of issues generally with the Walmart leases, wherein they might sign a lease for a certain footprint, at a certain rental rate, and then they'll pay themselves to outfit the building, develop the store to make it bigger, which will then reduce the rent per square foot because you have a larger footprint. And some of their leases also are just takeover leases, but again, I haven't seen any of the lease agreements. I've just brought in what they're reporting at the Portage one.
So the Portage one was 128,000 square feet. This one's 97.
Yep.
From what I can read anyway. Any other, did you look at other Walmarts? I'm trying to get a handle on whether, you're saying that's an older building because it was built 1966 to 2007. Yeah, obviously,
Yeah,
there's
it's
been a lot of
definitely an older
rentals in
building,
there. I don't know what's the effective date. Effective 1980 to 2007, and the Portage one is, you don't know the effective date of that one? Or
The
one-
effective year built to that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's listed there as being 2000. I believe that's when they
2000.
demolished Unicity and put up that
Okay,
Walmart.
so you can't really clarify more.
That one's definitely newer than the subject property.
Okay. But you don't know what the gymnastics are to arrive at this, you haven't seen the leases?
No, I haven't seen the leases. That's why I've only included the one Walmart. It was more just for reference, along with Canadian Tires as well. Yeah.
97, the Canadian Tire is St. James, okay, I'm familiar with that one too. Okay, that's all, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
This is a model generated rent then?
Nope.
No?
No, it was set by an assessor at $12.50.
Okay.
The assessor that dealt with all the Walmarts and stuff. And as I said in my presentation, I believe the rent was set out last year, or sorry, in 2018 at $12 a square foot. So they gave it a nominal rent bump to $12.50. The rest of the rents are model driven, but again, we're really only talking about the Walmart right now, so
Right.
yeah, and that was set by an assessor.
Okay, thank you, that's all.
And your cap rate is 7.3 on this?
Yeah, I think we're looking at all neighborhood shopping centers today and they're all 7.3.
Okay. And you're using page 9 of your brief for,
It
to
has the
support your
table.
cap rate?
Yeah. And there's also the addendum, I believe, included in the back.
Can you tell me on page 9 where your cap rate is falling on this chart?
So if you're looking at the retail rows there, there's a neighborhood row.
Right?
So you see the city of Winnipeg low and high, so the low for neighborhood shopping would be 6.15%, the high would be 9.4%. But you can see that then 20th and 80th percentiles are from 7.15 to 7.3. So it's right at the 80th percentile of the bell curve. If we look at the others, I mean, Colliers and Cushman Wakefield don't really report on neighborhood shopping centers, the only one that does CBRE, and they don't get 7.3, they only go from 6.5 to 7.
Did you have a chance to visit this property?
Yep.
Okay. And how would you rate the condition of it?
The Walmart itself, I mean, it's similar to other Walmarts, it has the grocery store to it. It has decent ceiling height, it has a loading in the back, lots of access. As a consumer, the access is a bit weird to get in there with the Shell station being where it is. But again, most Walmarts are located at the back of a, you can look at the one on Taylor or even the one on Portage, you have to go through quite a bit of other retail to get to the Walmart, so, if we're talking Walmart specifically. Yeah, the amenities located in the store are the same as you'd find at other stores.
Of course. And I'm sorry, you said this was a former Target store?
It was Target, then before that was Zellers, and I can't remember what it was before that, because I would have been.
Kmart way back.
Yeah, I would have been a kid. Yeah.
I don't know, I
Sure
don't
you're-
know that far, I don't know what it was before that.
But this was essentially still built in 66.
I can't comment, I don't believe it was built in 66, I think that was a different building. But I believe it's an older Walmart compared to, say, Keniston or, yeah, it'd be more comparable to what you'd see at St. Paul Center, which is also an older Walmart built in the 70s, 80s.
Thank you. So you've got an effective age of 2007. I'm gonna,
No, it's a rolling effective age, so,
okay,
yeah. Those are the effective age we put on the
So-
buildings.
so, but, and why? What occurred to bump that age up?
Well, I'm not saying anything bumps it up. I don't know the age we put on the Walmart. The 2007 ones, like that was the actual year built, if you're looking at my first page. So there was a building built in 2007 and we're using the effective year 2007 for that one. The only thing that got bumped was the building that was built in 66,
Okay,
which again, I'm not sure which one that is specifically.
all right.
But that was bumped in 1980.
Just one last question. Page 3 of your rent comparables?
Yep.
I'm sorry, and I missed it. Did you say the, at 3655 Portage, that's a Walmart?
Yep.
Okay, and that's at Unicity?
That was a former Unicity site, yeah. So it would have been built when they demolished Unicity in 2000.
Thank you, that's all my questions.
Just one arising, I'm trying to go through the tenancy schedule, and I can't find the Walmart on here, because it's a bit blurry, I was wondering if you could point that out.
Find it out? Okay. So it's just on page 20.
Which one, sorry, I saw.
bottom of page 20 just has Walmart
Oh, there it
listed
is.
there.
Oh, there it is, there it
It
is. there.
has the lease start date as being 1985, I believe, and going to 2022. So again, that would lead me to believe personally that it's an old lease that they're just tacking on to there. And that the rent per square foot there is $6, and I believe it's 86 cents a square foot. But again, it's leading me to believe that it was an older lease that's just been adopted by Walmart.
Okay.
And whenever you're ready to give us your presentation.
Great, thank you. Everyone did get a copy of my presentation? Sure. Good, yeah, that's up there. So I'm just dealing specifically with the Walmart side, and the rent that's being applied to the Walmart. 435 Lakewood Boulevard. And just on this page, executive summary there, just looking at the requested assessment, that's on the Walmart portion, but on your, when you run through the equations for the value, if you, instead of the assessor's rent, if you put in the Walmart rent, that's, my requested rent, that's the value I come up for the Walmart portion. Just going along to page, numbered correctly here. Just going on to the photographs of the subject. Taken from the map, that's,
Page 8.
yeah, page 8. Memory didn't come up on my copy for some reason. Then page 9, showing the aerial photograph of where the Walmart sits, and again, an outlining of the Walmart in relation to the entire store there. On page 10, 10 and 11 and 12, just giving a provincial overview on the overall economy for Manitoba, 13, 14, up to page 15. And basically, my conclusions there is that Manitoba's economy felt the effects of the recessions in Alberta resulting from a contraction of the oil and gas industry, but remains in a balanced state as the province is less dependent on its oil and gas. Nominal GDP continues to grow at approximately 2.2%, with real GDP at 1.5%. Unemployment rates remain slightly higher than the national average at 5.7 versus 5.5. However, expanding labor market for the manufacturing and construction are supporting employment rates have increased 1.8% since the beginning of 2019. So capital expenditures will continue to be made in manufacturing and construction and commercial real estate, while investments in oil and gas are subdued. In summary, Manitoba's economy is currently at a stabilized rate compared to the more depressed conditions of Alberta and Saskatchewan. So just showing overall that the province as a whole is pretty much in a stabilized rate. Then I looked at on page 16, looking at Winnipeg in specific, on 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Just looking at the overall growth rates of the economy, employment rates, household growths, home starts, showing again just a stabilized rate of about a 1% growth, so we're not expecting any great expansion happening. On page 22, I looked specifically at the retail overview and talking about there's been a massive change in the retail sector over the last couple of years. And they refer to it as the real estate, the retail apocalypse. Basically, the large number of retail stores are closing, and your demand for large space retail is dropping dramatically. So just in figure 1, just showing from the US side, all the stores that were closing. And then on page 23, looking at list 1 there, a bunch of stores that are closing within Canada. The 2 big noted ones obviously are the Sears and the Target stores closing. And then in your figure 2 on page 23, showing the list of Canadian anchor-sized retail shrinking. You've got your Walmart, Home Depot, your Western Group, which is your superstores, Canadian Tire. Targets are now gone. You've got HBC, Costco, Sears is now gone. Rona and Lowe's are the same, and Leon's Furniture. So we've got a shrinking anchor-sized retail market that's happening. On page 24, looking at Winnipeg specifically, we can see Sears in 2017 announced it was into bankruptcy protection and closed all of its stores. This has had a big impact on the regional mall vacancies. And just at the bottom of the page there, looking at the Target space, really hasn't been filled since Target left. There's still some vacancies going on there. So looking on page 25 at the Sears and Target backfill. The exit of Sears in 2018 continues to impact the current retail market as landlords work to deal with the fallout of losing this iconic anchor tenant. Sears has been part of the shopping center landscape for decades, and coming on the heels of an abrupt Target closure in 2015 did not make it any easier. Subsequently, landlords are now faced with few opportunities to release these spaces and reposition these retail spaces within existing malls. This releasing remains a challenge for most landlords as the retail market has changed over the last decade. Large format retail stores are quickly becoming obsolete with the emergence of online retail giants like Amazon and the shift away from traditional large format retail space to smaller display lounges exhibited by companies like Tesla and Apple. These spaces have left landlords with the decision to either backfill these spaces or demise them into smaller, more productive retail uses. In Winnipeg, the first Sears location to be backfilled is the Garden City Shopping Center with Seafood City. A California-based grocer described itself as catering to the Asian Filipino community. This 43,000 square foot grocer is projected to open in 2019, occupying approximately 50% of the Sears space, with the balance demised to accommodate Michaels and smaller retail units. The Kildonan Place Sears is expected to announce their lead tenant replacement, and it is anticipated that this space should be fully committed in 2019, but no actual announcements have been made to date. The former Sears at St. Vital Center is predicted to be subdivided into a minimum of 4 premises, while there is less certainty as to the status of the Sears at Polo Park. Previous vacant Target stores have all been leased to date. However, landlords were only able to do so through a combination of replacement tenants and demising the larger spaces. Polo Park Center has tenanted the former Target space through a combination of HomeSense, Winners, and office space for a call center. The Kildonan Place also demised the area to tenant it with Marshalls, HomeSense, M&H, Urban Planet, and several other small retail units. So if I look at figure 4, we've got vacant space right now of the old Sears at Polo Park, St. Vital Center, Kildonan Place, and we've got the Garden City Shopping Center Sears location. Of the 92,000 square feet, about 43,000 being taken up by an anchor, and then they're going to split the remaining off. If we look at figure 5 on page 26, we can see that these are the statuses of the Target spaces. Polo Park Shopping Center, again, that's been converted to a call center, HomeSense, and Winners. The Kildonan Place has been split up into multitudes of smaller CRU spaces. The subject property at 35 Lakewood Boulevard was leased out to a Walmart. And the grants, the 1080 Grant Avenue was split between a Canadian Tire and a Good Life Fitness for 116,000. So even one tenant didn't take over the whole 116,000 square foot space. Just a little bit talk about the overall vacancy rates as a result. So we looked at market rent and trying to define market rent on page 28 and 29. Talked about fair market rent and built-to-suit locations, and that's on 30 and 31. And then on page 32, we looked at trying to determine what leases are out there for the large spaces. And basically, if we can just go to the figure 1, City of Winnipeg leasing, I looked at all the Canadian Tire and Walmart spaces that are leased out. There is the 1080 Grant Avenue, which we just talked about earlier, as being leased out, split between a Canadian Tire and a Good Life Fitness. This was in June 2015. The start date was $6.75. There is then going back to 750 St. James Street. And this is kind of a complicated lease arrangement from a renewal from an original lease in a revised amount. If you turn to the last page of the brief, I've described what's happened in that lease. On 20 St. James, there was originally a 20-year lease in 2000. They had an amendment to the lease in 2008 to increase the rates, but they were given $1.8 million inducement for that, giving you a net rent of $15.41 over the blended term. And there was an expansion of the space of 9,500 square feet. The next one on McPhillips, again in 2008. Again, referring to the last page there, that was originally a 1998 lease, 15-year lease. That 10 years in, they did an expansion on it. They got $1 million inducements, and averaged the rate together to get a total of a net rent of $10.43. And then there's their expansion space and their original space for a total of 93,000 square feet. The key thing to think about there as well is that these are 2008. These things happened in 2008, and the market was substantially different than it is today. As we've gone through, we've seen that the Target has come and gone. The original Zellers, there was original Zellers that Target didn't take over, that those ended up being torn down. The Target has come and gone, and now Sears has come and gone. So there's ample space out there. So next one is the subject property, which Walmart signed the lease in 2016. Move in there for $6. It's actually $6.66. There's a couple of older leases for Walmart at Regent and Portage back in 2000. Again, the market is substantially different from then and from now. St. Mary's, again in 2003. And there's a Walmart way back in 1999 on Keniston at 636. You can sort of see that the market was low, started to take off, and now it's headed back down again due to the abundance of space. Just looking at the vacancy rate, the assessors used a 4% vacancy rate for the Walmart space, which was applied to the subject. Don't have any major disagreements with that. And then just turning on to page 35, based on looking at these rents, really we end up relying on two of the more recent ones, which being the Canadian Tire at 1080 Grant at $6.75, and then subject property at $6.66. And we put a recommended rate to $6.75. And that's the submission.
Thank you. Questions?
Sure. So staying on page 35, since I think you guys already are there. I just want unclear, because in your report you talked, and verbally you talked about using a 4% vacancy rate, which is what we used. But your calculation, you used 2% here.
Yeah, that's an error in the spreadsheet. It should be the 4%. That would change the value, yes.
So you're looking for a different value then, or are you sticking with the vacancy 2 and the 13,350?
Sorry, the 13,350?
Isn't the
Oh,
table-
sorry, no, it should be the 4% on there, yes.
So you want.
Yeah, I didn't have the exact calculations of what the assessor had used
Oh, okay.
for the values there, so we had a couple of people trying to derive them.
Yeah.
So there was a little variance on there, so.
Okay, which would affect your shortfall, which, I mean, the city
Yeah.
again used $8 and you used 16, so you wanna use $8
Yes,
on that?
yeah.
Okay. That was my questions about that. Yeah, you put lots of stuff in here about the vacancy. I mean, retail landscape generally is changing throughout. I mean, some of the vacancies you put in here are going back a ways, on your page 23. Some more newer ones here, but, you're not contesting the vacancy rate anyways, so we don't really need to go over that too.
No, my intention there is that to show that the market for these type of properties, or for leasing these type of properties, has changed dramatically. It's a supply and demand issue. When there's hardly any demand and you have a supply of something, the price has to drop.
Well, and like the page 26 that you have included with the status of target locations, where they've all moved out and we all have new tenancies in it. I would say, with the exception to the subject property, the other 3 properties you've listed here are all getting much higher rents than the $6.75 you're suggesting today. With the calls, like just starting at the top with the Polo Park, flagship Target store they built. The call center, Home Sense of Winners, they're getting much higher rents than $6.75. The Kelowna Place one where they've redeveloped it again into
Yeah,
multiple tenancies.
and that's because they've had to put in major capital expenses to derive those new rents. Basically, gutting the interior, tearing down parts of it, redeveloping the whole site on there. So if you have the space, your choice is to try to get a tenant to lease it out like they did in the other 2, the Walmart, Canadian Tire / Good Life Fitness, or they're gonna have to spend a lot of capital to redemise the space, redevelop the whole mall, and come up with different rents from that. Again, not being the large size, now they're stuck with a much smaller size.
Well, again, it's odd though that the Walmart's, the Canadian Tire and Good Life Fitness you're talking about at Grant Park there, the Good Life Fitness doesn't pay $6.75. I mean, they
I'm not
put up
sure.
a demising wall between the Canadian Tire and split up the Walmart, or sorry, the Target space. The issues I have though, we've used as your comparables, is the Canadian Tire and the Walmart, and you've kind of demonstrated on your last page, is that there's expansions and tenant inducements which have led to these going down without actually seeing the leases. Like I talked about in my presentation, we don't know exactly how old the lease agreement is.
I have submitted them to the assessor, the entire documentation last cycle. They've got all the paperwork for it. I don't know what happened to it, but.
Yeah, I've never seen
Because I brought these in the last cycle and I've sent all the documentation. If you want more, if you want the documentation.
Yeah,
I
we'd
can
like to see the
certainly
full
send that.
lease documentations
Yeah.
to see if they're just an amendment or assuming a lease. Or if there's an actual market rental amount we're looking at here, which I don't feel is the case, and that's my position. Thanks.
Thank you. Maurice? Sorry, Maurice?
Oh, it's my turn?
Questions?
Yeah, I'm trying to compare this to the city's approach here. Looking at your workup, if I can find it again, here, on page 35. And the city's on, well, more or less page 8, I guess. So the city's using 12, on page 8, is it 1250 or 1275? I don't
Yeah,
remember.
I believe it's on page 7, if you look at,
Page 7?
yeah, it's rental ID 3518.
Okay. Okay, 1250. Okay. You're using 675.
Yeah.
Now, I see on the shortfall, the city's at $8, I think. You're at 16.
Yeah, and just,
Am I correct when I'm drawing that conclusion here?
that's what I did have in there, just for correction, I didn't have the exact numbers that the assessor had on this, so we kind of tried to derive it. And so the 4% and 8% and the $8, I'm not in disagreement with that. I don't have any evidence on that. The real evidence I have is with regards to the rental rate that's being applied to.
Trying to, if you'll allow me, I'm trying to look at your page 32, because that seems to be, that's the appellant's page 32. You're relying on the grant one, I guess, and the one on Lakewood at 666. Now, both of them are 15. The first one is June 15, and the other is 16. That's correct, I guess, the start date of the lease?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, now the others vary quite a bit, and I know you tried to comment. I see the Canadian Tire one on the third from the top at 1541. It's a 97,000 square footage. So I'm trying to make sense of your comparables here.
Okay, so
And the city obviously had some comparables that they had 3 only. So maybe you could explain it a little more, how you come up
Sure.
with your 675, so that I can get a handle on that?
yes, so if we look at the, on the right page here. I guess on page 3 of the assessor's brief there, they've looked at 3 leases. That they've got the McPhillips, St. James, and the Portage. Again, if you go to the end of my brief, I've sort of described what's happened in those leases for the St. James and McPhillips.
Those 3, 2
For
of them?
2 of them there, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
There. And they're not as straightforward as one would say a 2011 lease at 1750. There were some step-up rates in there, and there was an original lease and then a revised amount based on an inducement there. And the same thing with the McPhillips. There was a revised amount based on inducements there. The real reason to try and square these around is that we saw, if you look at what happened, these were both in 2008, and I would say in 2008 was a substantially different market than it is today. But remember back then, that was the rumors of Target coming in. Everyone was buying for space, upgrading their stores. But since then, we've lost Target, we've now lost Sears. There's been a real change in the retail landscape, which I tried to outline earlier. We see that there's less need for these large anchor spaces. And indeed, that's what's happening now. They're either they're happy to get someone in there if they can, otherwise they're going to have to tear them down, spend a lot of amount of capital to re-demise them, and get into smaller tenancies.
So your Madam Chair, if you'll allow me, on McPhillips, the city was using 12, you're using 1043
Yes.
in 2008, as of 2008.
Yes. So if you look at McPhillips, you'll see that the current lease, the step up from 2013 to 2018 is $12. And that's what the assessor has there, is
Okay.
$12.
So that's how you come up with your 1043.
Yeah.
And then when you go to compare St. James, you're 1541 versus the 1750.
Right. Again, if you look at that last one, you can see the current step up from 2011 to 2023 is 1750. That's the current step up that they have.
Okay.
But those were all the terms that were involved.
Okay, now getting back to the Portage, you didn't do the one for Portage though? The Walmart on Portage,
Let me just
at 824.
let's see. Portage. Yeah, so in my figure 1,
Okay, what page is that?
on page 32,
Yeah,
third from the bottom,
yeah,
I have the Portage, Walmart at 3655 Portage in 2000 for 824.
2000. Okay. But you don't have the workup like the others have.
That was just a straight lease, yeah,
Straight
for
lease?
20 years, for 20 years.
For 20 years?
Yeah,
Okay, till 2020, and we're looking at the 1st of April 2018.
right.
Okay. So that's what you were using at the city. That's what you used
Yeah.
as a comparable here. Okay. I guess that's it for now. I'm not too sure I'm gonna deal with this, but, these are my questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Linda?
So did your bottom line request for the value on this change with, or it's still 8,345,000?
Well, what I would suggest to the board is, if you look at the assessor's documentation for page 7, there is only one value for the shopping center.
Right.
So it depends on what happens with the other evidence you hear as well. But just basically for the calculation of the value, what I would suggest is here is for the retail line of the 97, for the Walmart here at ID 3518, where it's got 97,197, instead of the 1250, I would be suggesting to put in the 675
right.
and carry through the calculations. And of course, it depends on what happens with all the other
Sure.
rents, but
Okay,
carry
got
through
it.
on the calculations.
All right, thank you.
I have one further question, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
On your page 7, The 2017 assessment was 41,347,000. From what I read here, you're page 7,
Yes.
you got it?
Yes.
That's the first part, not the, okay?
Yep.
It was 40, did you appeal that?
I was not Walmart's representative at that time.
Okay, so we have to assume that this is what was in place then, like prior to this
Yes.
review?
Yes, yeah, I'm not sure what, I just had the total assessment there. AEC was, I believe it was Cushman Wakefield at the time was responsible for there. I don't know if they appealed it or not, or what happened there.
Okay, because if it would be 41,347 down to 80, well, with some adjustments, 83,48, so that's quite a,
Well, there's quite a big difference, again, is what's happened in the market since the last cycle. Last cycle, Target had just left, we weren't really sure what was going on. Now we're looking at this cycle, Target has left, we haven't got any new stores going in, Sears has left. We're seeing basically the demolishing of the large format stores. So the market has changed quite a bit.
okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just one question. So you are representing Walmart.
Yes,
Is this Walmart across Canada?
yes,
So you're familiar with this store,
yes,
with this company?
yeah,
Were you able to visit the subject property?
yes,
Okay,
visited a few times.
okay. I'm assuming then you've visited other Walmarts in the city?
Yes, I visited all the Walmarts in the city, almost all the Walmarts in Manitoba, most of the Walmarts in Western Canada.
Oh, my goodness, okay. Okay.
After a while, they start to look the same, but yeah.
Well, they're supposed to.
They're supposed to, yes.
Okay, so I just have one other question. Back to your page 32. So, because your lease rates, they're not actual lease rates, correct? Are they?
Sorry, when you say lease rates, they're not actual lease rates. These are the effective lease rates, right?
Okay.
They're not the, so that's why I had a discussion there, just talking about earlier, about economic rent, contract rent, effective rent. So basically, they're the effective rents.
Right.
They're not the contract rent, right? So for example, the two Canadian Tires, the assessor has a contract rent,
Right.
and that's the face rent of what they're paying, not the effective rent.
Yeah. Okay, I think that's all my questions. Any wish to summarize by either of you?
I think we've covered it
Okay,
at this point.
okay. Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
Right.
Can you state your full name, please? Do you affirm that the evidence you want to give at this hearing is true, the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
I'd like to call this hearing back to order, and we are going to continue to discuss 35 Lakewood Boulevard. Do you want to present your brief again?
Well, I didn't really talk about the other parts, so yeah.
Yeah.
But lots of similarities. So this is file number 19-4628, the other half of 35 Lakewood Boulevard. Again, lots of different buildings here, lots of different years built, kind of piecemeal, getting this one together. So more of the actual subject property leases on page 2 are reported subject property leases, and then rental comparables on page 3. Again, we'll stick to the top part of the page for the rental comparables there. Ranging from a low of $14 a square foot just over in Island Lakes there, not too far from the subject property, upwards to $23 a square foot on St. Anne's Road. So we have this property, despite it being really just one income stream, as a neighborhood shopping center, we have separate income streams for the gas kiosk and the car wash for Shell gas station. So if we flip to page 11 of my report here, again, I'm not sure how familiar the panel is with this subject property here, but the Shell gas station and car wash are seen right here in this part of the property. This upside down J.
I know it very well.
Yeah, and the car wash being there also, so. But yeah, we've applied a separate income stream for the gas store kiosk, which is page 5. So page 5, essentially what we have here is the convenience store for the gas station is 1,126 square feet. Applied a model rent of $36.53 a square foot. And we've given it a vacancy of 2% and a shortfall of $6 a square foot, which is really nonsensical, and a cap rate of 6.3%. And then we've added the pumps and storage tanks to the additional building value at $281. That's what the additional building value below is. And then the second income stream is the next page, page 6. For the vehicle car wash, again, we've applied a model rent of $19.83 a square foot to the 1,275 square feet. Again, we've applied vacancy and shortfall and other expenses to this at a cap rate of 5.55% for some reason. Really, Shell just rents out the pad space and puts in all their own stuff for the length of their lease, and then they're required to demolish and remove any contamination or tanks after the lease is done, like with every other gas station, but this is how we're still doing it. So page 7, following page. So we're looking there at all the numerous tenancies and the other buildings that are on their own separate pads, such as the Pizza Hut, the Credit Union Bank, or sorry, the BMO also there. For a total of 173,207 square feet of leasable area on this neighborhood shopping center. And yeah, we applied a market vacancy of 4%. Shortfall of $8 a square foot. And unrecoverable expenses being 2%, along with the cap rate of 7.3%, which we've gone over already before. At the bottom of the income stream, I've added a value for additional land value, as I feel there's been substantial development, not only to this Morgard site over time, but neighboring sites owned by the same owner along Fermor. If we flip to the back of my brief here on page 27. It just shows at the bottom, I guess, the whole view of the site as it stands, and then a detail of what I feel is a developable site. I mean, looking to neighboring sites, they've added a new MLCC store beside the co-op on Fermor, and further down the road, they've added a new strip mall across from the Giant Tiger by the Shoppers Drug Mart and Canadian Tire down the way. So there is development, there is the need for more retail space. So I'm taking that chunk there, again, approximately, using GIS, 100 square feet by 400 square feet in that rectangle there. And I've applied a rate of $40 a square foot to that 40,000 square feet. And I have some vacant land sales just over on page 4. page 4, I've had other vacant land sales here that are around the same size. I do have one smaller one on St. Mary's Road. But the sales per square foot range from $23 up to $50 a square foot. Again, these are older sales, going back to 2013, 2014, when there were more commercial sales available. But they're all located on major thoroughfares. Again, wanted to stay with similar size and use, rather than try to get something newer that was not as applicable as these ones here, so. I've also included just pictures of where they are located, these vacant land sales. They're at the back of the brief also, on pages 23 to 26. So again, located right out major thoroughfares, such as Marion, St. Anne's Road, St. Mary's Road, and also the one on Portage Avenue. And that would add $1.6 million to the assessment effectively. Page 8 is just the summary page that shows the 3 different income streams there. I believe in the applicants, since we have the double kind of appeal here, have created a new stream just for the Walmart space, which really isn't necessary, I think, since they've said they want the same rates as what's in the neighborhood shopping center anyways, for everything. So, yeah, that just summarizes the total value here today. I mean, I didn't file any paperwork to ask for an increase, but effectively my value, in my opinion, would be that it's $42,205,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Rowan?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Taylor, if we could turn initially to page 8.
Yep.
Simplify matters. So, with respect to the gas kiosk and the car wash, that's streams number 1 and 2, correct?
Correct.
And the department, notwithstanding that a 7.3% rate, cap rate was applied to the main mall, the department's applied 5.55 and 6.3 to these individual streams?
Yeah, that's correct.
And we can agree that you made reference, Mr. Taylor, earlier to on page 9, there's the chart of the retail cap rates, and I believe you said this property would fall within the neighborhood category of retail, correct?
Yep.
And the low, the 20th percentile is 7.15 and the 80th is 7.3?
Correct.
Okay. So those 2 cap rates for the car wash and the gas kiosk, those are well below the 20th percentile, correct?
Well, they wouldn't fall under this category. They'd be in their own.
They are part of this neighborhood shopping center, correct?
If I were to take them out of there, yeah, but if I were to do that, I wouldn't value them the same way anyways. It's just a pad site, like I said. There's no vacancy to the gas kiosks.
Well, we're not talking about vacancy, we're talking about cap rate.
Yeah. Well, the vacancy is different too.
I'd suggest, Mr. Taylor, that it's odd that the department's put those rates on, but we can debate that, I'll debate that in due course. Now, with respect to, now you've mentioned what either the department or you've considered to be excess land, correct? And you've now made an adjustment. So you mentioned that there's been development up and down this, sort of that area. What are the land to building ratios of the properties that you're referring to, Mr. Taylor?
I don't know. I'm not talking with them.
Okay, have you considered the land to building ratio for the subdivision?
Yep.
And it's 3.2, correct?
Yep.
And are you familiar with the, well, actually, let's go to the map. So if we could turn to page 11. And this isn't where you show, and I appreciate you showed the area. It was the only area that I would have thought it was, but that you're suggesting. But what we've got, the big building is the Walmart, correct? At the bottom of page 11, you've got what I think is a 35. My eyes are not very good, but
Yeah.
35 is Walmart, and then you've got the remaining, all of the remaining developments. This is the subject. So all of this roll, or sorry, all of the land contained on this roll results, we can agree, in the land to building ratio of 3.2.
Correct.
And the development of this mall has occurred in stages, but for the most part, all of these significant components, they've been completed for many, many years, correct?
Correct.
And the owners to the best of your knowledge, the owners have not applied for nor made any indication that they would be developing that area that you are suggesting is excess land, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Then briefly, I'm not gonna belabor this, Madam Chair, because I'm firmly of the opinion, I'm gonna file rebuttal on it, that there is no excess land, but just briefly on your sales on page 4. You applied I believe, a land rate of $40 a foot, correct?
Yep.
And the land sales, comp number 2, in October 14, that's on St. Anne's Road, similar size, and that one sold for $23 a foot, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, on the, we turn to page 7 then. I'm just gonna ask you to do one calculation, Mr. Taylor, and it's because it will help frame the discussion here. So that with the potential market rent for the shopping center, it's $3,105,335.
Correct.
Now, the calculation I get when you take, because I'm taking Walmart out of this equation because that discussion's been had. So if you take the Walmart out of the equation, my potential market income that I calculate is $1,890,373. Can you just verify that you get the same number so that we're on the same page with that?
So that's deducting the
That's
3,105,000, and you're taking a 1,000,000.
214,962.
What page is that, I'm sorry?
Page 7 of the
7?
department's brief, yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yeah, I get 1,890,373.
Thank you, Mr. Taylor. Madam Chair, could I ask the panel members to write that number down? It'll just help for reference when we're talking about our presentation. So again, it's 1,890,373. That's the potential income stream for the NSC component that I'll be talking about.
The potential rent.
The potential rent, exactly right, yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, the department, in this case, they've applied the 2% for the non-recoverable, but the 5%'s not included in this calculation, correct?
What, 5%?
The 5% non-recoverable? You
Yeah,
haven't
we have a
included it.
2% allowance for non-recoverable.
Right, and the 5% is no longer, the department's position is the 5% is no longer put into the assessment, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Now, the rental range. So on page 3, the rental range that the department's looked at here is from a low of $14 to a high of 21, I believe, correct? Or 23, actually, 14 to 23.
Yeah, so I presented earlier.
And that is entirely consistent with, if one looks at page 2, with the leases in place, with the exception of that liquor mart at $1.20, which is obviously something peculiar, but everything else, in fact, there's some leases that are even higher still than the rental range indicated by the department's rent comparables, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Madam Chair, those are my questions. I'll have some rebuttal material, but we'll deal with that in due course.
Thank you. Maurice?
Yeah, I got a question on the excess land.
Yep.
I'm looking at your comparables on page 25, 26, and 24, 25, 26. Would you say that these are more accessible than the one that is on
And the
the
subject
subject?
property?
Yeah,
No,
no?
no, I believe it's the same.
Because from what I see here, they're right next to a street, while the subject is between, it's next to Formore,
Yeah.
which means it's gotta go through these back roads to get out. You know what I mean by back roads? I mean the accesses that are not there. And I thought maybe there was better access on the comparables. That's was the purpose of my question. But you don't think they're more accessible than the one on Fernwood?
I feel like for visibility, for comparability, for visibility, it'd be the Portage Avenue, but I guess, yeah, you could say that the 3600 Forge Avenue would have better access directly off, whereas for this portion of access where it's located in the parcel would be, you have to go across Pete's Hut to get to it, or McDonald's.
You're using 40 versus your highest is COM4, which is on St. Mary's,
Yep.
$50. And this is a sale of 2013. Okay, that's all I had, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't have any further questions.
I just have a couple. So you had stated earlier that you visited this
Yep.
subject property. So this excess land, is this the first time this has come up?
Yep. Yeah, it's my opinion, I mean, I visited the site over the years, I live in the area. They've used it as like a recycling depot for the city previously, or sometimes they'll fence it off around Christmas time to sell Christmas trees. In the summertime, there'll be RVs parked in the spot. I mean, it's not, as Mr. Reimer was arguing, used for parking for any of the businesses really. It's more or less just an empty spot in the lot.
So this mall was built between 66 and 2007, correct?
Yep.
And this land, for all this period of time, 50-odd years, has never been developed.
Oh.
So, and I'm just asking more out of curiosity,
Yeah.
so do you personally make the decision that this is accessible land? Or do you?
Yeah, this is all my decision.
This is all
not
yours?
somebody else's.
This is, okay.
My decision too would be not to have the separate streams for the car wash and the gas kiosk either.
Okay,
But that's the way, that's not out of my control, whereas this excess land's completely under my control. And
okay.
again, I didn't really, Maurice kind of stopped himself short on the question, but I used the $40 because these are older sales too that I've included. So there would be some time adjustments done to them to get them up to the $40.
Okay. So you visited this property?
Yep.
As you have, as you said many times, you live in the area, and you looked at this 40,000 square feet
Mhm.
and decided that that can be developed.
That could be developed based on seeing the other developments in the area, like I said before.
Okay. Thank you, that's all my questions.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Let's start out with rebuttal, because this excess land issue is, and Madam Chair, you picked up on some of the questions that I had when I looked over this, and so we made some inquiries. And I appreciate Mr. Taylor's forthright responses, that this was a decision being made based on the property. And yeah, I'm familiar with the property too. There are some bins that are there part of the time, and there's a Christmas tree lot, but there's a very good reason why it has never been developed. It's because it's not access, it's not capable of development with the property improvements as they are at the present time, and it won't be unless, and I'm gonna stress this, I spoke very specifically with the owner, unless the owner is prepared to actually reconfigure the space, which would involve demolition, there is no excess land. The 3.2 to 1 land to building ratio is a very good indicator. It's sort of as a starting point. A Walmart, for instance, and there's been lots of discussion about the Walmart would not, simply not accept, and this mall would be making an extremely poor strategic decision by developing this land that Mr. Taylor's talking about to the detriment of specifically Walmart, but also to some extent the other tenants. They're gonna be slitting their own throats, and it wouldn't happen. On page 1 of the rebuttal, we talked about the adjustment that's been made. There is, and we're gonna be absolutely steadfast on this, there is no excess land at this site. The land area that's presently used for parking, and a portion of it, as in fairness to Mr. Taylor, yes, indeed, there's some bins that are on a small portion of it, but that land is required by the mall to remain as parking only. We've asked the owner about this, and he's confirmed that no development has been or is contemplated at this time. I recall, Madam Chair, that this mall has been, the initial construction at this mall was in 1966, more recently with some of the much smaller areas in 2007, but there's a reason why they haven't developed that component. The owner has confirmed that the existing tenants do require the land area, and any theoretical further development would entail demolishing existing structures that are on the site. There's an article that we've attached to this rebuttal from the appraisal journal that talks about excess land, and the pertinent statements relating to this issue are in paragraph 4 on page 2. In the case of an improved property, separation of land that is potentially excess should not result in, I just have trouble with this word, diminution. Basically, you shouldn't be diminishing the value of the remainder tract. While a land to building or parking ratio may be above typical levels for market, which it isn't in this case at 3.2 for retail of this size, it's actually lower than market, but in any event. While that ratio may be above typical levels for the market, it's possible that there are factors such as building placement or configuration of the overall tract which may warrant retention of the entire site for its principal improved use. In this case, separation of the additional land would result in a higher level of functional obsolescence and a lower economic life to the building improvements. And that's specifically what the owner said. They actually said, now, when one looks at zoning, do they have the required parking for zoning? Well, yes, they do, but do they have the optimal level of retail parking for a retail center like this with Walmart? No, actually, they're already significantly below it at the 3.2 land to building ratio, which is why that site hasn't been and is not contemplated to be developed with the improvements as they exist on the subject. So the land to building ratio, as we state in page 5, is lower than optimal ratios. And for all of these reasons, we're suggesting that no excess land adjustment should be made. We're attaching at pages 5 and 6 the quotes that I've talked about in the real estate appraisal article, and it's the same information that I've just read to you in that paragraph. And we've also attached a municipal board decision at 150 Wyatt that talks about excess land, the excess land issue in that case. In that case, at page 11 of our rebuttal, the board simply makes the statement based on the facts in that case that the board doesn't agree with the city assessor's excess land opinion. The land required to support the property's primary use, such as a parking lot for an office building or playground for a school, is not excess land. Only land beyond the needs of a particular use is determined in the market can be considered excess. And therefore, at the bottom there, they say, therefore, this land has no additional value. And that's certainly what the owner has stated in no uncertain terms to us, that any further development, theoretical development, would require actual demolition to the existing improvements. So then I'd suggest for these reasons that the board should not consider the excess land value in any way. And then if one turns now to our main brief, and our pages 8 to 9, and recall that what I asked the board members and Mr. Taylor to confirm is that we're just talking about initially here the remainder of the neighborhood shopping center assessment outside of Walmart. The assessor's potential net market income for all of those CRUs was $1,893,773. Our potential for those same CRUs is at the top of page 8 is listed at $1,821,203, and that includes all of the CRU space excluding the banks, which is $1,179,997. That's shown in the chart in the middle of page 8, and then the restaurants at $295,008.
Sorry, Carrie, are you still on the rebuttal for this?
Oh no, I'm on the main brief.
Oh, I thought you were presenting
We're still on
rebuttal.
rebuttal.
Yeah, we're still on
I
rebuttal.
apologize.
Sorry, yeah.
I heard you.
Okay. We're on the main brief.
We
at
get
page 8.
lost
On
when
page
you don't
8,
tell
yes.
us.
But I still have to ask questions on the rebuttal.
Yes, sorry.
So
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm open to questions, but
Yeah.
just letting you know that I didn't know. I assume I would go through my presentation and then have the questions.
No, everybody gets to ask questions.
Oh,
on
for-
the rebuttal.
oh, absolutely.
Sorry.
You want?
So
that's
I just
fine.
want to deal with that
Yeah,
first.
okay, absolutely.
Mr. Taylor, proceed.
So it's your position that you said irregardless of whether the space is used or not, that it could not be considered excess because demolition would have to take place?
The owner has stated, what the owner has stated to us is two things. Optimal shopping center parkade ratios are call it 10 stalls, what they define as 10 stalls per thousand, which would be, when you do the math, roughly half the number of stalls, or, sorry, double the number of stalls that they have here, so but that's optimal. So they're far below optimal, and then what they've said is, any such hypothetical plan to develop would involve demolishing some existing structures to reconfigure the site, based on the existing
Like
tenants.
which, like, I've been very clear as to where I think the site would be, what would they have to demolish, to be
But
clear?
they would have to demolish some of the existing structures to the, that would be to the south, and it's for this very reason, Mr. Taylor, that there isn't, notwithstanding your opinion on it,
Yeah.
they don't believe that there is sufficient parking as it is. So if they're adding building area, they're saying we've got to take away some of the building area essentially to recreate the parking.
Yeah, I've heard that before many times. It's on my first appeal and dealing with this. But yeah, doing the 1 stall per 100 square foot of leasable area, we have that space here when I did all the count. I don't have the count exactly in front of me today. And then just my experience with the site where they don't need, like, people don't park there to go to Walmart or to go to the Pizza Hut or.
I think they do, Mr. Taylor. You're making that statement, I disagree with you. At busy times, it's not gonna be at 24 hours a day, but at busy times, this site doesn't have enough parking as it is. They've got a little bit of that recycling with recycling bins, but that's a tiny
No,
little.
the recycling bins have been gone now.
Right,
The city
right,
doesn't have
and then they
those
set up
anymore.
temporary structures for very, very specific purpose, but
So at Christmas time, at the peak of retail season, they'd rather use that space for Christmas tree sales.
that a portion of that space, it's not taking up 40,000 square feet. It's taking up, that Christmas tree lot, Mr. Taylor, is, I'm assuming, taking up maybe 5,000 square feet. So if you wanna consider that excess, what kind of building are you gonna put on 5,000 feet?
5,000 square feet. But anyways, that's your position versus mine.
It is.
And the owner wouldn't say what he'd have to demolish to get rid of.
No,
So
that's why I'm
something
saying,
would have to go.
any theoretical development would involve taking something away from the 175,000 feet. If you're adding 10,000 feet here, you've gotta take 10,000 feet from the existing space to create the parking to make it feasible for the center. That's why we're saying that it's simply not feasible.
Yeah, so I would suggest that it would add value and add traffic to the site, where people would want to come if there was new development there.
I'd suggest it diminishes the value of the existing improvements.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice, did you have any questions
No, I'm
regarding the
okay, thank you,
rebuttal?
Madam Chair.
I have no questions. Would you like to proceed with the brief now?
Thank you.
Page 8.
I apologize. I was just going through it all as one presentation, so appreciate it.
We've got to go back to years now.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Reimer, could I just ask if you could speak a little louder and just a slightly bit slower?
Absolutely.
Sorry.
No, good, thank you for the feedback. Okay, so, Madam Chair, could I ask the panel members and Mr. Taylor to open page 7 of Mr. Taylor's brief, and then page 8 of our main brief. Have them open sort of side by each. So, the department's brief for the NSC component, recall that once you take the Walmart out of the equation, the potential net market rent is $1,893,773. And our corresponding amount, looking now at our page 8 of our materials, at the top of page 8, the potential market rent, once you take out the Walmart and the Shell Station car wash, which are separately assessed, is $1,821,000. So we're about $70,000, call it $70,000 up, a little less than that. So our potential market rent is based upon the CRU space shown on the chart in the middle of page 8. There, $53,733, $21.79 a foot. And in the restaurant space for the Pizza Hut and the McDonald's, at the bottom of page 8, that adds another $295,000 and $8 to our potential rent. And then moving up to page 9, once you add in the bank space, there's the CIBC and the Bank of Montreal, it's another $355,197. So the sum of those three potential net rent income streams is $1,821,203. So that is the potential market income that will apply to those CRU spaces and bank spaces and the restaurant spaces. The department's applied 4% for vacancy, and we don't disagree with that, don't disagree with the shortfall rate. We do as the board would expect, we're suggesting that the 5% non-recoverable expense should remain in place as it has for all previous cycles up until 2020. So we're going to have a separate submission on that, and we're asking the board to reinstate the 5%. The department's applied a cap rate to this income stream of 7.3%, and in this particular case, we don't disagree with the 7.3, and we will also apply it in our evaluation. So if one looks at, on page 10 then, the income approach summary there for the CSC, the NSC now, the restaurants and the banks, and when one runs those numbers through, then the total value is shown there is $21,947,729 for those components. Then moving on to the Shell service station, we don't have any issue with the market rent or the vacancy, the vacancy allowance we're suggesting should be 4%, which is consistent with the remainder of the mall. And then moving on to page 11, the shortfall rate is $6, and we've applied that rate. Again, we're suggesting the non-recovered should, for all the income streams that we're representing, should be reinstated. And in this case, the capitalization rate for this component has been assessed at 6.3%. We're suggesting, pardon me, that's 7.3% consistent with the remainder of the mall should be applied, and we'll be applying the 7.3% as well. We'll go through our cap rate study as well in this case to support the 7.3%. So our evaluation for the gas kiosk then is located at page 12. Incidentally, we don't disagree. Mr. Taylor had mentioned the adjustments for, I believe, tanks and pumps, tanks, and canopy, $281,000, and we're applying that same adjustment as well. So using the 7.3 cap and the remainder of the parameters there, we come in at a value of $781,245. Then moving on to page 13, again, the market rent that the department's put on the car wash of $25,283, and that is reapplying the same rent. We are suggesting that the vacancy allowance should be 4% for all income streams for the subject. It's one economic unit, and we're applying that same 4% allowance. Shortfall rate is not at issue. Non-recovered expenses, for the reasons we'll talk about, we're suggesting should be restored to the 5% allowance. And again, with the cap rate, we're suggesting that 7.3% should be applied to this entire economic unit, including the car wash, and we're applying the 7.3% in this case. So then, at page 14, we have the valuation of the car wash at $306,074 using the parameters as valuation parameters as shown on that page. Now, the Walmart valuation, I will leave that for the board to consider. The number that I put in is based upon David's submission, so that is basically put in just as a to fill out the rest of the brief, but it's precisely the values as were suggested this morning, and I'll leave that with the board to consider. Then if one turns to, on that last page of the number, it would be the summary chart on page 16. For all the income streams, we've got the Newland Shopping Center there at $14,085,912, and then the Walmart, as has been suggested, the RST, which is the restaurant, the SKP and UCWs, which is the gas kiosk and the car wash, and then the bank income streams, all using 4% for the components that we're representing, all using 7.3% as a cap rate, and all applying the non-recoverable expense allowance of 5% in addition to the 2% structural allowance that has been applied by the department. So based upon all of these figures, then the final valuation is $31,383,000. The bulk of that, I believe, relates to the request of the Walmart, but there certainly are some differences between the department and ourselves relating to the remainder of the mall for the reasons we've talked about. Summarized as $70,000 difference in potential rent for the neighborhood shopping center component, the restoration of the 5% non-recovered, and the application of the uniform cap rate of 7.3% for the entire mall. in addition, the suggestion in no uncertain terms that there should be no excess land adjustment in this case. So then, and go through this once and ask the board and Mr. Taylor to carry forward the comments, questions on the retail cap rate study, if that's appropriate, so we don't have to go through this multiple times.
It's up to you. If you'd like to touch on it briefly, go ahead.
So if we could then, on the separate attachment, the initial one is the 2021 capitalization rate study for retail properties. If I could ask the board and Mr. Taylor to turn to that document. So page one, obviously the theory behind the capitalization rate, just the first sentence summarizes it very well. The capitalization rate represents the required or acceptable rate of return on a real estate investment. And of course, value, as we all know, is defined as net operating income divided by the overall capitalization rate. Now, in this case, when one turns to page 2 of our attachments, there's the couple of charts there. The chart in the middle of that page is the Bank of Canada's benchmark interest rate, which had increased by 75 basis points between April of 16, which was the previous reference date, and April of 18, which is our current reference date. So that's significant. There was a significant increase in that benchmark rate. And 5-year mortgage rates, very predictably, had also increased during that time from 2.39% in April of 16 to 2.99% in April of 18, an increase of 60 basis points. So of course, the implication of all of this is that the cost of money has gone up significantly, and we're suggesting that would have an effect, obviously, on cap rates when one's looking at valuing these properties. At page 3, there are a couple of charts relating to the brokerage firms. Again, at a minimum, the compression would be, the implied compression based on those charts would be 0. In one case, it actually was increasing to some extent. And that again further confirms that at a minimum would suggest there's been no compression between the April 16 reference date and the April 18 reference date. Now, there's an interesting, at the bottom of page 3, there's a very interesting indicator there. And we state the valuation of the property using the income approach is based on the principle of anticipation, of course, which is the perception of future benefits. And the negative outlook that we're suggesting was certainly becoming evident as of April 18 was evident, or was one of the telling signs there was the unease in the real estate sector, retail real estate sector was seen in RealCan, which is Canada's largest REIT, announced the sale of 100 properties, most of which are located in secondary markets. So when a retail, certainly a retail REIT starts to divest themselves of some of those holdings, that is not typically a good sign. And at the top of page 4, there's actually an article that we attached, and a quote from that article states, "If guidance for the future for retail in Canada is to be taken from this change in direction for RealCan, it may be that retail as an asset class is a questionable focus given RealCan's move towards a more diversified portfolio that will include residential. In essence, RealCan's moving away from retail as a focus and is now looking to become entrenched in the type of live, work, play lifestyle centers that have been topical over the past number of years, not the least of which is because of the potential headwinds that retail may face." So, again, in that context, we also included another article from Bloomberg talking about the difficulty in the retail market, and at the bottom of that article, there's a quote from Tim Wang. He says, "There's probably more to come in terms of difficulties." Head of investment research at Clarion. He states, "I'm sorry to say that, but if you look at the picture for overall retail, it's not good at all. Brick and mortar retailers may be at a watershed moment as cutting market share and store traffic force fundamental changes to a 100-year-old model." So it's definitely, and this is consistent with some of the earlier comments, that definitely the retail sector has been turbulent and is certainly undergoing significant change, and that does elevate, we're suggesting, the risk in many cases. Now, I'm going to summarize. I won't go through all of these points on pages 5 and onward. There's a few examples that have already been touched upon. Sears closing out Toys R Us, going into bankruptcy in the States, and in Canada they ended up pulling through it, but at the time of the reference date there was a high degree of uncertainty. The Canadian grocery industry, which is reducing its retail footprint, and then moving on to page 6. And again, this relates to some of the grocery store markets and some of the quote-unquote pruning that had been going on in that sector. Going to page 7, of course, Target abruptly closing, and some of the mergers, Best Buy, Future Shop, and River City Sports being one of the local retailers that was also closing its doors. And then moving on to page 8, there's also very significant risk factors that were becoming evident in the mid-box and big-box real estate sector, and some of those examples are listed there for the reference of the board. And all of these items we touched on this morning do certainly, we suggest, create a very difficult economic climate for the retail sector, and would, in our opinion, at a minimum, warrant a capitalization rate that would be at least consistent with the previous April 2016 cap rates, and that's what we're going to be suggesting in most cases this morning. Then when one looks at the data that we've got, so at page 12, the property sales that we listed there's 15 indices, and the sales that we've considered in the analysis that we've done are summarized on that page. As you can see, it's the low cap rate is 5.92%, the high cap rate is 9.33%, and the average is 7%, median of 6.89%. And that's certainly the summary of the sales would be consistent with the suggestions we're making this morning concerning the cap rate issue. And the conclusion on page 13, based on the market indicators and the time that we're talking about, most retail cap rates we're suggesting would range between 6.5 and 8. And what we're going to be suggesting in this case, with the consistent cap rate of 7.3%, and in the cases we're here this morning, is that the cap rates for most properties should be no less than the rates applied in connection with the 18-19 assessment for the properties, based on the April 16 reference date. And we also submit that there is an elevated risk associated with regional malls, big box and mid box retailers for the reasons we talked about, with a high degree of turbulence associated with that market specifically. The sales, pictures of the sales comparables, or the cap rate comparables, are shown on pages 12 through 19, and the articles that we refer to in our report, along with the broker studies, are attached as well. And then going to, starting at, just for the board's reference, at page 68 through to the end of the brief, those are the details of the retail capitalization rates that are included in our chart for the board's reference as well. So that's cap rate. Finally, we have one last document, the non-recoverable expense study. Madam Chair, I know that you have heard this argument at length. Ms. McFadden and Mr. Therian, I'm wondering if
I have as well.
you have as well, Mr. Therian, you have as well?
Yeah, we know.
Okay, so
We know
then,
the whole story.
then I'm going to go through this very, very, at a very high level. So, and then ask if those same comments be carried forward, please. It's as simple as a few brief statements. Page 1 of those materials. Again, what we're suggesting, the 5% is not. It's not an expense relating to the standard management fees charged by the owner, which are typically recovered from tenants on that basis. In the middle of page 1, what it is and what we're suggesting it always has intended to be was a stabilized expense involving a number of typical non-recoverable expenses relating to the proper and competent operation of the property. They're not recovered under any circumstances. So then, going through, and again, I'm going to be very, very succinct. If I could ask the board members, Mr. Taylor, turn to page 9, please. So the non-recoverable expenses that we have applied in our analysis are on the middle of page 9: leasing commissions, professional fees, asset management fees, and advertising marketing. So at page 10A, The next page over is the chart relating to the 32 properties that we considered in our analysis, and this represents the summary based on a review of 3 years worth of statements. The average is shown at the bottom of that chart. On the relevant column, 7.42% and a median of 5.75%. If you include TIs, which I'm not suggesting should necessarily be done, and certainly we're not relying on that, but if you include them, they're predictably a lot higher, 11.76 as an average and 7.35%. The 2% allowance, turning to page 10B, the 2% we're suggesting is and has always been a structural allowance, and certainly based on our very brief audit of some of the materials that we've encountered, the 2%, as you can see there, was the average of 15.77 and a median of 8.62. 2% would be a conservative allowance. This is not meant to be comprehensive, but rather is an audit of the properties where we actually had all of the information and could determine the calculations. So for all of these reasons, we're asking for the 5% non-recoverable allowance to be restored, along with the 2% structural allowance. All of the materials relating to the details of the percentage calculations start at page 10B and continue on along with the other attachments that I'm sure the board is very familiar with. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. Mr. Taylor, did you have any questions regarding
The whole thing?
the whole package? Both.
You did talk louder, sir.
And fast.
Didn't slow down, no.
No, we need to slow down.
No. 3 questions. So first would be page 8
Of which one?
of they're all of what you're brief.
Okay.
I feel like you guys have gone over the cap rate and non-recoverable stuff enough. I don't need to present rebuttal on that today, so.
Okay, page 8, got it.
So page 8, and as we've looked at my page 7 in comparison, that we're pretty close, oh sorry, your pages 8 and 9.
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
That we're pretty close in that mine's at the 1,890,373. And yours was at 1,821,202.
Indeed.
What I found though to be was that we were apart on leasable area by 1,500 square feet,
Okay.
which is the very last tenancy on my page 7 is 1,500 square feet. There.
Okay.
So is there a reason why you didn't have that area included, or?
Our area will have been pulled off the rent roll for the property, but if we miss something, then for sure we will correct it.
I mean, it's not the crazy amount, it just
No,
like, if we threw that one into yours, the 1,500 square feet, we have the same leasable area, and then,
I guess I'd suggest, Mr. Taylor, that, again, we're taking our areas directly off of the income and expense statements, like that we handled at the same day, so I'm not sure why we've got that
missing?
missing.
Yeah, cause then instead of being 70,000 on gross potential income apart, we're putting that 32,025 in, we're really close in terms of gross, that's my only point on that matter.
Fair.
So then it becomes less of an issue. And then page 16 is my second question. Or sorry, I should flip to page 35 first of your brief. So page 35, at the very bottom, this is the rent roll that I've included in my submission, so it's not just me that got the poor quality on it, you got the same quality in yours. The very bottom there, for Shell Canada, you wouldn't disagree that it's a pad lease?
I would agree it's a bad lease.
Okay. And that they get an annual rent of $90,000,
That's what they're showing.
and generally there's no other expenses that come with this, there's none really included.
Well,
Listed.
the tenant would, yeah, I mean, I.
The tenant would be responsible
Yeah,
for
yeah.
pretty much everything else.
Yeah.
So just taking that and then going towards your capitalization rate argument, being at the 7.3%, which I totally agree with, it should really just be one stream. There would be the same expenses for vacancy shortfall is my position on that. Would you agree?
I'm sorry, Mr. Taylor, you lost me there.
So for the gas station
Yeah.
pad sites,
Yeah.
generally for all gas station pad sites, the owner receives a rent, whether it's part of a neighboring shopping center or just a freestanding gas station.
Mhm.
The owner will receive a rent, in this case it's $90,000, it's a
Mhm.
50-year lease. Where the tenant's responsible for everything, correct?
They would be responsible for their own, other than,
Their own expenses.
I would expect the snow clearing and some items like that would be just one on the lot, but they're gonna be paying their own utilities and that kind of stuff for sure, yeah.
My point then would be, would it not be arguable that the 90,000 they receive is just the net operating income they get for that portion of the property?
But at the same token, Mr. Taylor, you would never as an investor assume that you're always gonna get that rent with no vacancy and no, right? So sure, it's the potential contract rent. Now, we've applied a potential rent of, I think, because this is the gas kiosk and the car wash both, so we've applied a potential rent of 60, call it 66,500. That is lower than the contract rent, but the two things, one wouldn't assume you're gonna get that in perpetuity. And when gas stations close down, you got a real problem, because now you're dirt farming and doing all the rest of the stuff we talked about. So there is a risk there, right? So that's why we're saying the 7.3%. I wouldn't necessarily quibble as much on the vacancy allowance, but certainly the 7.3%, especially in the context of this lease running out in a couple of years after the reference date. I don't agree that you would apply a lower cap rate, if that's the question.
No, my question wasn't about cap rate, my question was just purely about what they're getting, and that I agree with you that it should be capped at 7.3, but my point is that the 90,000 they're getting should be capped at 7.3.
Well,
There shouldn't be how the city
but-
does it, where there's like this part, and there's all these other moving parts. It's really, this is what they get, is 90,000. As you stated, there's no other real expenses.
But then, Mr. Taylor, then we've got to factor in, recall that we're not disagreeing with the adjustments of 281,000. But if we're talking about valuing this entirely on the 90,000 and take, so then you've got to make an adjustment to that 281,000 as well.
Yep,
You've got to take that out of the equation.
I agree.
So it results in fundamentally different calculations.
Yeah, no,
So
I've done those calculations.
I wouldn't agree with the 90,000 meaning, that is the contract rent, we can agree on that.
Yeah,
But I would not agree that it's as simple as just taking that as your net operating income, because by the same token, all of these lease rates that we're talking about, the contract lease rates, you can't assume, in our valuation process, you're taking off vacancy, you're taking off non-recoverable, you're taking off shortfall, it's the same process. Whether you've got the 90,000 revenue here or the 1.2 million revenue for all the other CRUs, it's the same thing.
the difference is pretty close. I'm just saying that, so you're saying you're not disagreeing with me on that there's really no vacancy allowance that should be applied to the gas station and car wash?
No, I'm not agreeing that there should be no vacancy, that's precisely what I'm not saying. The 90,000 is the contract rent.
Yep.
I'm agreeing with that, but I'm also agreeing with the department's potential rent and the adjustment for the, I'm calling it pump snacks canopies, the 281,000. But what I'm fundamentally disagreeing with is if you're saying 90,000 should be the NOI, well, no, that's the same potential contract, or that's the same contract rent as in place for the CRUs, where you're still taking all of these rents, you're adding them up, but then you're applying the vacancy, you're applying the non-recovered, you're applying the shortfall. It's the same process.
But it's different. The CRUs, someone moves out, someone else can just move in. Generally with these long-term leases for gas stations,
But
we never see it go from a Petro-Canada to a Shell station
But you
to a
see them,
co-op.
but you see them pulling out.
Yeah,
them
you
dirt
see the
farming and
tenant
getting
take
rid
it
of
all out.
Yeah. So
That's my point. If there's not these expenses, they don't exist, and that it should be simplified.
if you're suggesting the 90,000 should be the contract, 90,000 rent should be the NOI, I just don't agree. I don't agree with that process.
And then I just have one other question. And it was about your page 25. Pages 24 and 25.
Yes.
Just there, that you guys had the property in appeal last cycle, correct?
Indeed.
And just that you guys agreed to a cap of 6.75 on certain portions.
Yeah,
That's everything. Thank
well,
you.
based on what the
The
Based on
department
what
has-
the board, I'm not saying we're agreed to it, but what the board used. Can we go back to my page 25? Oh, I see, the reduction to just.
Pages
yeah, yeah, yeah,
24
you're
says
right.
you guys accepted the
Yeah.
recommendation.
Yeah, yeah,
That's all I'm saying.
indeed, yeah.
Thank you.
That's an important point that Mr. Taylor brought up as a sidebar. Because of the representation of Walmart, can we ask that the board explicitly state, and these statements remind me of it, explicitly state the basis upon which the Walmart's calculated, and hopefully the remainder, the different issues we're talking about, but specifically so that David can,
Correct.
and we can
Yes.
figure out what's what there. Okay,
Right.
thank you.
Yeah.
I had a separate question once we're done for you guys.
Okay. Any questions, Maurice?
Well, I hope my colleagues are, got everything down pat, I haven't. Because I try to compare so that I can figure this out. So why don't I go to the city's page 8, and the appellant can confirm this if I'm on the money or not. So the city's page 8 on gas, I guess the only change there is the cap rate
No, not quite, close.
and also the 5%?
Yes.
Both of them, is nothing else
And
really?
we've used 4%, but, 4% for vacancy allowance. So, Mr. Therian, Madam Chair, could I ask the board members, and again, it's not a numbered page, but it's page 16, with the chart
On yours?
on our brief, and
Yeah, I
keep
looked at
the,
this, but
keep
I
the
tried to
page,
keep up.
page 8 of Mr. Taylor's brief and page 16 of our briefs, if you look at them side by side. So yes, Madam Chair, for the SKP and the VCW income streams, the department split it out, and we have two, and so we've applied, if you see there, 4% vacancy, and if you use 2%, it's not a material difference, but the bigger difference is the 5% non-recoverable
Right.
Yeah,
and the 7.3% cap.
and the cap, okay?
Indeed.
And on the car wash, because
Yeah.
I'm just confirming
Yeah,
here.
yeah,
Basically, the same thing here, the cap rate and the
non-recoverable,
non-recoverable?
yes, and
Okay,
vacancy, but it.
Now, when I get to the last column of the city, there's so much stuff in there that I know that your NOI, not your NOI, your rent
Yes.
is basically right on if you add that 1,500 square feet.
No, we'd still be different by, if you assume Mr.
Yeah, I'm
Taylor's, we'd be,
trying,
okay, so,
It's like 30,000.
yeah, exactly.
you've got 30,000 lower?
Yeah,
Then-
after
So,
that.
Okay.
see, the
Yeah,
difference.
you're on page, I'm sorry, okay, if I look at your page 9, you were at 1 million, I'm sorry, my colleagues, page 9 of the appellant.
Yeah.
Uh,
1
You
million.
gave a total of 1,021,203.
Exactly, so.
And
if
he
you take-
gave 1,893 something,
Yeah.
okay? And then the 1,500 came in after.
Well, it did, but I'm not necessarily, I'm not sure where the 1,500 feet came from, Madam
Well,
Chair.
I'm
So
not
to be clear,
either.
okay? Because we're taking information off the red roll, but if this board assumes the 1,500 feet should be added, then the difference would go from call it $70,000 to about $40,000. Because Mr. Taylor's 1,500 feet is 32,000 in potential rent. So if you just take that difference, we're talking now about, between 40 and, we'll call it between $37,500 and $40,000 difference in potential.
Okay, and are yours actuals based on, I mean, those are actual figures taken from the roll?
Yeah, so if we can turn to page 8, Madam
No,
Chair.
but I'll take your word for it.
Yeah,
If
no,
you're
but
telling me.
the charts with the lease dates and such, we didn't find a need to make any adjustments, so yes, it's exactly right.
Okay, And so when I go to the, that's where I'm trying to break down the, so if I go to stream 3 on the assessors, page 8, do I
Yes.
start off with 1,000,008 something
Yes.
instead of 3,105,000?
Well, that includes the Walmart.
That includes the Walmart.
My stream 3 includes Walmart.
Oh, gee, okay. So what else then? So we've got to look at your cap rate of 730, your shortfall at what, 8%?
The non-recoverable
Five.
expenses.
Yeah, I know
5%.
that.
But the shortfall rate we're agreeing with.
You're agreeing with?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that figure, there's the cap, which is the same?
It's the same for the NSC, like, which is the big income stream. The department's applied 7.3%.
Yeah,
We're suggesting 7.3% should also be applied to the car wash
yeah.
and the gas
Yeah,
kiosk.
yeah.
So that's where the
Understand
difference is
that?
there, yeah.
And the 5%?
Exactly, the
Yeah.
5% non-recoverable, exactly right.
Okay, I think I've got the picture. My colleagues will probably correct me when we go in deliberations, but that's okay. I think that's all, Madam Chair, right now.
Thank you.
Okay, so
Questions?
I'm missing something. City's total leasable area is 173,027.
Hold up. The total for the streams or the total? Which
You
stream?
know what, actually, this is important.
Choose one.
Okay, so this is, sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair. The leasable area for the whole thing, if one looks at the department's brief on page 1, it's 175,430 feet. And that's on the right-hand sort of towards the bottom. And if you look at our page 16, it's 175,623, so we're actually 223 feet higher. So the whole 1,500 feet, I'm very confused where that's coming in.
But your gas stuff is different than ours
Is
too.
it?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So that's where, I guess I'm suggesting, so sorry, the leasable area for the entire mall is 175, we have it as 175,623 square feet.
But there's also Walmart in there, so.
Walmart is in that area, that's correct.
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, what am I comparing that number to, that 175?
So can we ask, Madam Chair, can we turn to page 16
Page 16,
of our main brief?
that's this one, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the 175,623 is the grand total of everything. Within that, the C, and that's a mislabel on my part, the CSC should be NSC. The department's assessment of, like, the big NSC component, that includes our CSC, it includes the Walmart, and it includes the RST, which is the restaurants, and it includes the bank.
Right.
So the only separation from the department's NSC component and our valuation, we both separated SKP and VCW, but then the rest of the income streams, the total of 4 income streams, would be comparable to the department's NSC income stream. That's when you're comparing the
Okay,
amounts.
so that 173
Yeah.
on his page would be your CSC, plus the Walmart, plus the restaurant, plus the bank.
Exactly right.
That's the,
That's
that's the
right.
leasable
Yeah.
rental fee,
Yeah.
okay. All right. That's my only question.
Okay. And I'm only asking this to clarify. I thought I heard you say when you were having your exchange, gentlemen, that you agreed with Mr. Reimer on the cap rate for the gas station?
Personally, yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah. But there's other parts we disagree on. So we can't agree to everything.
Okay. Just wanted to clarify that. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. No summer.
No summer?
Well, I had a question for you guys.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry, you did. You
So
did.
my question is, say that one of the 3 people that isn't you guys is unhappy with your decision, how does that relate to municipal board filings and so on and so forth? So say if,
In the context of the two files, right?
well,
There's two
because it's all
files.
tied together, so
Yeah.
say, yeah.
I do not know the answer to that question.
Because usually it just gets reduced to one file.
Right.
And ask Visa ahead of time to just
Yeah.
reduce it to one, to
Yeah.
avoid that headache, but,
Yeah.
Our little voters will have to have the same decision.
Yeah.
yeah, both orders have the same decision, but then the whole thing is the whole, so say if David's unhappy, the whole
The whole thing.
value will be under appeal,
Is that how
Right.
it's going?
which will then make
And
Carrie.
I can't, that will have to be coordinated between David and ourselves and the owner.
Yep,
That's the only thing I could comment from my perspective on.
the same owner authorized both you guys on separate files.
Yeah.
And we agree that if it goes to the next level, and even at this level, I mean, the end result, it's one property, one value. If you have, obviously got more information, only says that value, but it is more than fair wall value.
Okay, that was my question for you.
Yeah, I've never had a brief like this, so
No.
this is,
I've
and we
never,
never want one again, ever.
I've never had one
We do
either.
these all the time.
Makes it a little more, makes it a little too complicated,
Yeah.
because, you know, we've gotta go through this gymnastic, which is incredible to pick up in an hour, you know? There's
Understood.
only so much in that little brain here that you can handle.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing. I was pointing to myself.
Okay, we are going to proceed to the next property. Carol, you're okay to proceed?
Thank you for your time.
Yeah,
Thank you
we'll
very
take a
much.
little break after this, I guess.
Yes, we'll take a break after 20. Do one more?
I put it in my.
Sure. Is that okay? That's fine. Okay. I'd like to call this meeting back to order, and we are going to proceed to 20 Lakewood Boulevard, and Mr. Taylor, if you'd like to start us off.
Sure, so for file number 19-2811, which is roll number 06007-659-400, 20 Liquid Boulevard. The proposed, total proposed 2020 assessed value is $10,577,000. Portion of that is exempted as a non-for-profit daycare center of $428,000. Again, we have this labeled as a neighborhood shopping center with 4 buildings on site, being built between 1973 and 1993. We have a plan area that matches the gross floor area of 43,682 square feet, and the leasable area just shy of that, being 42,912 square feet. And a land to building ratio of 3.78 to 1. Flipping over to page 2, we see that they've been compliant in submitting eco-expense questionnaires for the subject property, as well as the subject property leases below. The first one of which is the exempt portion for the Rainbow Day Nursery. There, on page 2. Flipping over to page 3. We're looking at rental comparables in the area, being in Windsor Park, Island Lakes, and in San Patel on Dakota Street, or further down on Vermilion Road. They range from a low of $13 a square foot to a high of $27.91 a square foot. Flipping perversely to page 5, for the income stream there, for the exempt portion. This is for the daycare center. The daycare center is located at the rear of one of the buildings, with not a lot of parking. It's just kind of an overflow from adjoining roll number. They have more daycare space in that we'll talk about next. So yeah, that 1,389 square feet is applied a model rent of $20.96 a square foot. The actual rent they receive on is $15.75 a square foot. Again, it's just kind of one room with a bathroom access at the back of the buildings there. Applied a modeled rent, of $20.96, but then the vacancy is 4%. Expenses and shortfall are gonna be the same as what we see for the neighborhood shopping center stream, with 2% for the expenses and shortfall $8. And the cap rate for this is 6.3%. I just wanna point out that's an error, it should be 7.3%. This is just due because it's on its own stream, it's a lower square footage, but really it's a couple of rooms in the back of the building that are leased out to the daycare as like the school age program for the daycare center. So I'll just do a quick calculation on the value revision. So 369 is what I get with applying the cap rate of 7.3% on the exempt portion. Because it should have the same cap rate as the rest of the building. As long as you guys are following me there. So page 4. All the rental amounts here are modeled for the neighborhood shopping center for the other 10 tenancies in the building. We have some modeled rents that are lower, some that are higher, but they're all supported by the comparable market rents we have there. They all seem to be market rents. Again, same vacancy, shortfall, and expense allowance, and the cap rate being 7.3%. Flipping over to page 9. You see the aerial photograph of the subject that has the different buildings there. I don't know if you want me to highlight where the daycare center is, Madam Chairman, but yeah, you just have to go through the back, and it's just at the back of this building here. So it's really in a back lane. The other daycare center is in this building on a separate roll number.
Okay.
But the owner wanted to have this roll number separate from this one for whatever reason. So yeah, the daycare center is just right at the back, again, of that building there. Last couple of pages are just the income and expense questionnaire and the assessment department's addendum on capitalization rate.
Thank you. Questions?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, panel members and Mr. Taylor, could you turn to page 4, please? So I think you alluded to it, Mr. Taylor, this is model driven right from top potential rent down through the cap rate, correct?
Right.
Okay, and were you aware that the department's prior cap rate for 2018 was 7.75 for this non-exempt component?
For the non-exempt component,
Yeah,
the
like
whole
for-
property?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wasn't aware.
Okay. Madam Chair, can I ask that the previous questions relating to non-recoverable be carried forward? And those are my questions, thanks.
Yes, thank you. Maurice?
So to confirm, the exempt is 369,109 now? Is that what it is?
369,110 is my
110.
calculator showing.
Okay, well, I didn't round it off.
Yeah. But yeah, 369 total is what that's just.
That's all, thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, the only reason why it does this and splits it off into 2 streams is that's the way the whole valuation and putting out the tax bill was split.
Well,
last-
I might have another one.
Oh.
On your, if you'll allow me,
Yes, go ahead.
you've got the NOI at 740 model driven
Mhm.
on page 4.
Correct.
I see the, I don't know how, if you've looked at this, but the NOI on the, provided by the appellant I don't know what page that is, but page 10.
Page 10?
Yeah. It shows 634, 389. Have you analyzed any of this to compare it to the model?
Yeah, just in the fact, a lot of the difference ends up happening as they're, like if you look at my page 12, on the rent roll, like I had said before my presentation, some of the allowed rents are above actual, some are below, but they're all on the market kind of range. When we look at the page 12, you'll see the very last tenancy for Ladco is the owner. It says owner occupied. They have a book rent of $7.41 a square foot on there,
Yeah.
which isn't really a model, or sorry, a market rent for the space. So the difference there, the $9,352, that's the massive outlier, I guess, that you can compare to my page 4. So we're using $17.54 a square foot on the space, so it's a $10 rent top up on.
You're at 1930 on your average on page 4.
That's my average rent, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's no $7 rent on that page.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Lisa?
So your new total value is 10,518,000 then?
Sure.
Okay. I think that's all my questions.
Just going to page 7 of your brief, your cap rate study.
Exact same answer I'll give you from last time. You're not supposed to
I
say
just
much.
want to hear that answer.
Oh, okay, so if you flip to the retail row and go to the neighborhood shopping center row, again, the city of Winnipeg has a low for neighborhood shopping centers of 6.15 and a high of 9.4. Really, that's the range, but most properties fall within 7.15 to 7.3%.
You were giving it 7.3.
We're giving it 7.3, which I think is what all of these have been assigned through the model. All the docked properties we're looking at today.
Did you have a chance to visit this property?
Yep.
Thank you, that's all my questions. If you'd like to proceed.
Thanks, Madam Chair. If I ask again at the board, this will be much simpler, I promise. Page 4 of the department's brief, and then open our main brief to page 8. So there's, what's that?
So you promise.
The issues are reasonably straightforward. We are different in potential rent, and I'll explain that in a second. Actually, I'm convinced that we have more in common than one would think. So the potential rent, there's a difference. The vacancy allowance, there's no issue. The shortfall rate, there's no issue. So it comes down to potential rent, and then the non-recovered, the 5%, and cap rate. So those are the 3 issues. On the potential rent, if you look at the department's brief, they've got a total potential rent of $801,590. Then if you look at our page 8, the chart in the middle, the potential rent we're suggesting to the board this morning based on a site-specific analysis, which is what I'm suggesting we're here to do, is $767,341. So that potential rent is based upon the contract rents, which are entirely consistent with, they're consistent with all of the market rents that the departments supplied in their materials, so entirely consistent with one exception, and that's been alluded to, and also certainly represents the best, the revenue that this property is able to generate. Now the exceptions, the vacant unit in my chart on page 8, the middle of that chart, 90-40, that's a vacant unit of 809 feet at 8, we applied a market rate of $18. The second last row, there's another vacant unit that we've applied $18 to. And then the very large unit, the office space of Ladco Company, and we are in agreement with Mr. Taylor's comments that the contract is affiliates. So the contract rent of $741, or the rent they're showing on paper at $741, we have not applied. We applied a market rate of $15, and that comes in at the $767,341 for that larger office unit. So that is the potential income we're suggesting this morning. Then running it through, again, looking for the restoration of the non-recoverable expense allowance of 5%, and then turning to our page 9. The department's model has applied a cap rate of 7.3%, but if you recall, and asking again the comments from our cap rate study to be carried forward, we're suggesting that certainly the indicators in the climate in which this property is operating as of April of 18 would support no compression, but 7.75% is the rate that was applied to this property in the previous cycle. We are agreeing in this case that a 25 basis point compression is appropriate, and we're suggesting 7.5% rather than 7.3. So the departments, I'll just give, if the board wants to stay on my page 9, but write in a page reference number, the confirmation of the previous cap rate that was applied at 7.75% is on page 21. So I'll just leave that for the board's reference. So we are suggesting 7.5%, and then turning to our page 10. That is the valuation of the taxable component, using the potential rent of $767,341, and the parameters as shown there, including the 7.5%, comes in at $8,957,000. With respect to then, and I'll jump straight through to the exempt component on page 13. The contract, or lease rate in place, I should say, for that unit was $16.25, which results in a potential rate of $22,572. We're suggesting the application of the same cap rate that we're making the suggestion this morning of 7.5%, so applying that same rate to this component as well, and that comes in at a rounded value of $263,000. So the on page 14, then our valuation of the entire property is $9,220,000 rounded, including the exempt component. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Just one quick question. Are there any concerns or issues, physical issues with the property at all that would warrant a higher cap rate?
Higher than?
Higher than the city's 7.3, aside from your economic presentation you've given, there's no concerns?
There's no physical concerns. That doesn't, our request isn't based on physical concerns,
Okay.
it's based on economics, but no, certainly no physical concerns I'm aware of.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
Thank you. Maurice?
Yeah, you're, on your page 13, on the exempt portion,
Yes.
you were asking for 262, and the assessor has revised his to 369. Do you think, are you accepting the assessor's new figure or not? No?
We're applying ours based on the lower potential rent and the higher cap rate, so we still come, and the application of the 5%, so we still come in a little different.
So you're still asking for 263?
263, yeah.
So is that it, Maurice?
That's it for me. Oh, I'm sorry, I
No worries.
never
Linda?
gave you
No, I have no question.
I just have one question in regards to sorry, flipping around. It's in regards to the LADCO rent.
Yes.
Sorry, the square footage at $15. How did you arrive at that?
The $15, and I looked specifically at, now this is a little different because this is actual office space. So when I looked at what was being achieved for the retail units, the larger sizes, I did take a premium off that because this is office finish and not a retail use. So looking at the $15 rate, I thought was appropriate.
Did you actually visit the LADCO office?
Okay.
Just going to redirect to you, Mr. Taylor. Were you inside the Electro office?
Not past reception.
Can you comment on the finishings?
Well, unless it's changed significantly, what I recall is it's pretty basic office finish from what I've seen, but again, the last time I was there was, not this past summer, but the summer prior.
Okay. So nothing.
I haven't been made aware of any changes since then, put it that way.
So I do have one more question, just in regards to your cap rate.
Yes.
So last time you were asking 7.75, I think?
The department applied 7.75.
Yeah. Okay.
Not to the daycare again, though, interestingly. So I'm sort of leaving the daycare out of the equation, but the main component that we're referring to on page 10, the cap rate was 7.75 last time.
Okay. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Can I just ask one more,
Absolutely.
please? How does the LAPCO office, since you've been through more of it than I have, compare to the walk-in, the medical center, or
The walk-in medical and dental center will have a higher degree of finish that's specialized for those types of practices. So this is more just basic.
So they have the same suspended ceilings, but they have nicer.
Actually, the ceiling that I recall, I don't recall suspended ceilings in there. Like not on the main part. There's offices that ring it.
Yeah.
Right, but not the main part.
Okay.
That's what I recall.
Okay. Thanks.
Any wish for a summation from either of you? No?
I can check with the other ones and see how they do in step one, but I think everybody's gonna have long term step. So then I will check with Lisa and see what she wants us to do,
Okay.
because yeah, I can ship it for this stuff now.
Yeah.
That's not appropriate to one more. Alright.
You're going to move on to 50 Lakewood Boulevard.
You're all caught up.
And whenever you're ready.
Sure, so 19-2630 for 50 Lakewood Boulevard, it's roll number 06007658000. I didn't mention it before, we have some exempt portion of this for the daycare space. The total proposed 2020 reassessed value is $3,859,000. Really, it's been coded as a neighborhood shopping center, but I believe it's more of a strip mall since it's just one strip. 11 units there. It was built in 1971, but the effective year built applied was 1985. Plan and gross floor areas are both at 18,000 square feet with a leasable area we've looked at today of 17,777 square feet and a land to building ratio of 3.44 to 1. Page 2 shows the compliancy for requests for income and expense information, as well as some of the subject property leases recorded. And page 3 again just has some rental comparables in and around the area in the south end of the city. Again, these range from $12 a square foot up to $23 a square foot. Flipping over to page 5, much like the last property we looked at, so look at the exempt portion first. This is again for the daycare center located within the strip mall. So it's 5,104 square feet. It's applied a modeled rent of $17.52 a square foot. A vacancy rate of 4%, uncovered expenses of 2%, shortfall of $7 a square foot, and it's applied a cap rate of 6.55% to get to the 1,263,000. Looking over to page 4. We're flipping backwards, I guess, for you guys. So all the rents we're looking at today are model-driven rents. Again, they're in and around the actual rents reported, and they're going to be market by myself. Again, for that taxable portion of the strip mall, we're looking at a vacancy rate of 4%, uncovered expenses again at 2%, shortfall of $7 a square foot, and the same cap rate we looked at, the exempt portion at being at 6.55%. Again, this is just my opinion, is that it's a strip mall, not a neighborhood shopping center. It's a strip building, one building, 11 units. So getting into that, because I know Madam Chair is gonna ask me a question on my page 7 again. So when we look at the retail row, this is hopefully gonna preempt the question. Retail row, you have the neighborhood row, and you have the strip mall row right below it. So you can see before we were looking at a range of 6.15 to 9.4%. We're looking at a much lower range, being 5.4% to 8.65%. So again, if you're of the opinion that this is a neighborhood shopping center, which I'm not, you'd be using a higher cap rate at 7.3 likely, as we've seen in other neighborhood shopping centers today. As we can see, the 20th and 80th percentile here is from 6.4 to 7.05% for cap rates for strip malls. Flipping over to page 9, Carrie's there already. I'll let you other guys get there. Yeah, we just see the strip mall there. As the convenience store facing Lakewood Boulevard, the other properties all face inwards towards the other property we just looked at. There. And then the last couple pages are again just the income and expense questionnaire and the city's addendum on capitalization rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reimer?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Taylor, with respect to then your evaluations on pages 4 and 5, you can appreciate I've got a concern with your cap rate. So 6.55%, that's the model-driven cap rate if one assumes that this is a strip mall.
Mm-hmm.
So if you turn to your page 9, so what we've got, the previous property we just heard is to the immediate north, and it's the two buildings that are oriented east-west, correct?
Correct.
And that's, the department applied based on their analysis, 7.3%.
Yep.
And so this property, because it's on its own roll, notwithstanding that it's got far less exposure to Lakewood, and it's, as you say, it's oriented towards the rear of the property, because of the determination you've made based on that, is it the area, because it's a smaller building area, that's what warrants the 6.55%?
Well, lots of what we're talking about today is looking at things site-specific.
Mhm.
So this roll number as site-specific, notwithstanding that the last property looked at, and then even the other one, when we're looking at the page 9, the KFC Taco Bell is located up in the northeastern corner of the property. It's all owned by the same, by Morguard. Really, they could look at it all?
No, that's wrong.
KFC owns the-
Morguard owns the property, or is the lessee of the property across the street. Morguard has no interest in any of these properties.
Either way, I'm looking at this property that we're looking at right now, the subject property as being in that purple rectangle, and looking at it as its strip mall. If that answers your question.
So, but it really doesn't, because, so the property, because the does this boil down, Mr. Taylor, to a question of the area of the building? Because the nature, I'm going to suggest to you with no hesitation that the nature of the asset of the subject is precisely the same as the properties to the north, save and except that the properties to the north have larger building areas. So is it the smaller area that, in your opinion, brings it down or changes the category?
The smaller area and just the configuration of the building.
Right, with less frontage, you mentioned the Max, which has the frontage on Lakewood, but the rest of the units face, in fact, the
Face
parking
the
lot
lot,
with
yeah.
the lot to the north, okay. All right. So, then if we might turn to your page 4. So the potential rent, this is model driven as to the rent then, the 286,210?
Yeah, it's all model driven.
Okay.
Yeah.
Based though on the different classification that you put onto it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, prior to, Mr. Taylor, prior to making this decision relating to, presumably because of the building area, can you advise this board, because the numbers are markedly different, can you advise this board as to what the potential rent was for the original assessment and what the cap rate was for the original assessment?
Well, I've already stated the cap rate was 7.3%. I don't have the exact PGI number right now.
All right, I will present that figure. So then, using your revised potential rent, I don't know, if I could ask the board members and Mr. Taylor to turn to page 6. So, based on your revised valuation, the NOI calculated for the property as a whole, classifying it as you have within the model, is $348,418.
Yep.
And turning to page 10 of your submission, the actual NOI for the 2017 was 281,000, correct? 281,137.
Yep.
Mr. Taylor, are you aware what the NOI calculation was prior to you making the changes? And if you don't know, that's fine. I'm expecting you don't have that material in front of
I
you.
don't have the number.
Okay, that's fine. I'll comment on that. And again, Madam Chair, same questions asked and answered as to the 5%.
Yes.
And I will have some commentary on cap rate in this particular case, but I'll leave that for my submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Bruce?
Yeah, your page 1 shows you're requesting 3,859,000.
Yep.
And your page
Page 6.
You're requesting 5,320,000.
Correct.
So what's the request? That first page is the request?
The first page is the request. Page 5 is my opinion.
Oh, okay. So what's the official position here? Is that the department is
position.
asking for 3,859,000? I'm trying to clarify
Yeah.
why.
Yeah, sorry, I should have put in the original amount and how they were calculated. I mean, the rental figures didn't change very much. Same with vacancy, I can tell you the shortfall is less as a strip mall. With the 8% we've looked at with other properties, or sorry, the $8. And the cap rate was 7.3%. It's just my opinion that it's a strip mall, not a neighborhood shopping center. You don't have any large tenancies here. It's not a neighborhood
So
shopping center.
you've decided to ignore the department's approach and to
Yep.
make your own on page 6.
Correct.
Okay. And the mailers,
Page 10?
yeah, well, there's I'm looking, the mailer here shows like the appellant says 281. You're, and I think you're at 308. I looked it up, you're at 308 as far as I can see. I don't know if I made a mistake. Your new NOI is 82 plus 265,
Is the 348,418.
so, yeah.
The reported NOI, my comment on that would be that they have, I mean, you have your property taxes included in that, and you also have some vacancy that has it lower.
So that's your only explanation. for the difference.
That's
So
right.
end up, it's modeled all the way through.
Yeah.
Even your revised page is a model,
Yep.
this one? Okay, thank you.
Questions?
So, a strip mall normally faces frontage property, correct? And it has visibility across the street driving in.
Not
This is-
always, not always, no.
So is there a definition somewhere?
A definition of a strip mall?
You know, obviously
It's-
these.
It's lined out like
Yeah,
a strip, and the parking is in the front,
But-
and there's no loading doors in the back, just man doors, like the subject. There's no definition that says it has to front the street.
But if this particular one would have a lot less exposure.
Yes and no. It's not like it's blocked off by anything, is the thing. It's blocked off by another
Well, when you're
property.
driving down the street here, you don't see it. When you're driving down the street behind, you don't see it.
Yeah.
You
Well,
don't
you
see the
still see it,
property?
yeah, you would still see it from Fermora and from Lakewood as you're driving up.
Not in the way that you normally do.
Not in, as if it was facing the road.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's my only question.
So I'm just gonna ask again, what my colleague has just asked. Does the city have written up a definition of a strip mall?
No.
Does the city have anything written up in terms of category of commercial properties?
Written up for categories? No, we
No.
don't.
Okay.
No, and
Just
strip mall was
curious.
just added in 2018 reassessment, and being slowly phased in on properties like the subject property. They're strips.
Interesting.
Subject.
Okay.
Yeah, before everything was classified as a neighborhood shopping center and had the higher cap rates. It doesn't necessarily impact the rental amounts the same way as it does for the cap rate.
So this was introduced in 2018?
Yes, last reassessment cycle.
So last reassessment, it was considered a strip?
Yeah, so even if you had like, say, a 3-unit strip mall on Pembina Highway that faced Pembina Highway, in 2016 reassessment, it was classified as a neighborhood shopping center. And neighborhood shopping centers typically, like, I know Mr. Unruh's provided us some appraisal textbooks. They typically are anchored by a big box retailer,
Right.
whereas this is not.
So then I'm going to assume that the cap rate was different on this property, or any properties that are now deemed strip malls, correct?
Yep, just like my presentation on my page 7 rows.
Did you have a chance to visit this property?
Yes.
Sorry, just to confirm again, page 6 is model?
Page
And
6
this
is
is
just,
your-
yeah, the summaries, but yeah,
Right.
all the evaluation for the rents is modeled. I looked at everything after I had switched over to strip mall and believed them to be market rents.
That is all my questions, thank
Can
you.
I just follow up?
Yes?
So you said that this particular property was actually considered a strip mall in the last?
No, this
No.
one was considered a neighborhood shopping center up until a month ago.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'll start by saying what is in agreement. There's a whole lot of disagreement in this case, but we are in agreement with is the 4% vacancy allowance, 2% other structural allowance, and the shortfall rate. But here's the concerns we have, because one of two things is happening. Either this property, and I'm gonna suggest this is a distinction without a difference, this property is the very same animal as the one to the north and should have the 7.3% minimum. We're suggesting 7.5, but 7.3% applied. And certainly, if anything, we should receive a cap rate that's higher still because of the limited exposure and the orientation of this property. Here's why I believe it's been misclassified, and Mr. Taylor confirmed if we could have the assessor's brief on page 6, Mr. Taylor's brief on page 6 open. On the one hand, so based upon this categorization of the subject to the strip center, the model-driven potential rent is now $375,632. So now, if one turns initially in my materials to page 14, please. Page 14 is the initial valuation of this property. And what you'll see is the potential income is $305,568. There's a $70,000 difference in rent from classifying this to a strip. That doesn't make sense. And here's what makes even less sense. If you now go to page 17 of our materials.
Sorry, where's the $70,000 difference?
The $70,000 difference, if you look at our page 14, and you see potential income of $305,568,
Yes.
that is the same number as now the department's or Mr. Taylor's position on his page 6. That has now changed to $375,632. It's a $70,000 higher.
Oh, okay, thank you.
So then if you take it a step further now, and you turn to our page 17, and recall my question, and actually my question of Mr. Taylor was the NOI that's shown on page 17 is $281,000. The property tax, I think Mr. Taylor briefly alluded to the property tax, that's a flow through because there's full recoveries at line 121 and the tax amount at 216. So that NOI is not affected in any way by the property tax. This is the actual NOI of the property based on the performance of the mall. So $281,137, just as a benchmark. Compare that then, going back to my page 14. The model-driven NOI, based on that initial valuation, is $281,717. So it's actually remarkably close. Now, I'm not agreeing even with that NOI calculation, but it is remarkably close. Now compare that NOI, based on the actual performance, to the revised NOI shown on Mr. Taylor's page 6. It's $348,418. That is, again, that's roughly $60,000 higher. So something, and this, you know, Mr. Taylor's presented materials that are based on the model, but either the property has now been misclassified or that model is horribly wrong. One of the two. But it's not even close when you start to characterize it. If you accept the model's parameters that this should be a neighborhood strip, now it's completely overestimating the NOI and completely in our submission underestimating the cap rate. So, now on to our own submission. If you turn to page 7, the potential rent at the top of page 7 is $239,288, and that's based upon the rents in place, including the unit 200. There's a $12 market rent that we placed on that space. It had been formerly occupied, I believe, by a fitness studio that they had moved out by the end of the year. And so we're applying a $12 rate to that space. There's a nominal $4 rate to vault space, that's 341 feet, that's really not leasable. But the rest of the rates there are as shown, and we come in at a potential rent of $239,288. The vacancy allowance had varied somewhat between 2013 and 2017, and actually 2016, they had finally filled the building, but in the years prior it was between 9 and 11%. By the end of 2017, the vacancy rate was 13.55%. As I say, with that fitness studio, I believe, yeah, so it was curbs for women, and they had left by the middle of August of 2017, or beginning of August of 2017. So that vacancy rate again was at 13.55%. So we're suggesting this morning, Madam Chair, the vacancy rate in this case should be based upon close to a 5-year average, which is 9% is what we're suggesting. So turning to page 8 then, again, ask that the comments and questions relating to non-recovered expenses be carried forward. Now, the capitalization rate, this is, the commentary at the bottom of page 8 is based upon the assessor's original valuation, which had applied at 7.30%. We're continuing to request and believe the 7.50% rate, bless you, consistent with the rate applied to the subject to the immediate north, which is the same type of animal, notwithstanding the department's new position here because of the building size. We're suggesting 7.5% should be applied. That is what we will apply in our evaluation. And then turning to page 9, using those parameters, including the 9% vacancy allowance and 7.5 cap, we come in at a assessment of $2,577,000 for the taxable component. We do not take issue with the, well, I should say we didn't take issue with the exempt component, but that, and I'll refer the board to it, that component, the initial value for 2020 was $902,000. So to be clear, we are not disputing an exempt component valuation of $902,000. So at page 10 then, our suggestion this morning is to reduce the taxable component from $2,957,000 to $2,577,000 and reduce the total assessment from $3,859,000 to $3,479,000. Again, if I could ask the board and Mr. Taylor to turn to page 14. This is what we had thought was going to be presented at this hearing prior to receipt of Mr. Taylor's brief. This is the original valuation of the property. As you can see there, as I've alluded to, the much lower potential income and the 7.3% cap. And on the right-hand side, that value of $902,000, that is the value of the exempt component that we are suggesting should continue to be applied, and just merely requesting the change in the taxable component. Again, there's other attachments, the 2017 income and expense mailer, along with some previous rent rolls to confirm our vacancy calculations, and the request that the board order the reduction accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reimer. Questions, Mr. Taylor?
Yeah, just a couple. So you're page 9?
Yes.
So for the Ladco neighboring property owner, or that is the owner, Ladco.
Indeed, yeah.
Okay. That unit you've applied $14
Yes.
based on,
That would have been based on my opinion as to how the other units were doing.
or all the other units are higher.
All the other units are retail though. But certainly,
So
they
it's
are higher.
like $5 less a square foot because it's not retail.
It's an office, yes indeed.
So what differs the finish from the retail to the office?
The retail tenants will generally, the level of finish for an office can be comparable, but the office tenants are typically paying a little less than the retail tenants, especially the smaller ones. But the $14, I'm looking at this, Mr. Taylor, and I would not object to the use of a rate that's, closer to 15 or 16 bucks. I wouldn't quibble with that.
Again, that's lower than what they're getting everywhere else. And then the vacant unit, you've applied $12, again, based on what?
The previous tenant was actually paying, I apologize, the previous tenant was paying 13 1/4, so I think I looked at that and the fact that it had been vacant and there's vacancy issues and that they'd want to fill it reasonably quick. So I used, at my page 22, you can see the rent for the curves for that space was 13 1/4 per square foot. And prior to that, it was 12. So the space seemed to be renting, most certainly due to the location of it at the other end of the building, it's not renting for the same levels as the other units. And so I used a lower rate of $12. But admittedly, the last paid rent was 13 1/4.
And then page 17, which is the first page of the income and expense
Yes.
questionnaire. So it is partially owner occupied then?
Yes.
What percentage is it about approximately?
Well, let's turn to page 21. So the Ladco space, now they put a rent of $14 on it, so I'm guessing that's where I got my $14 on it. But rent, unit 120 is the Ladco actual premise, and then there's that vault space of 341 feet.
Okay, so that's like 2,000, so it's more than 10% of the building is owner occupied?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which would impact the net operating income that they declare on the same page?
Well, by marginally, recall that the $14 is also included in the calculation, so it wouldn't change very much, no, but it would change a little. And the vault space, quite frankly, is not leasable.
Yeah, I had questions with the vault space. Is it connected to their office? I never ended up seeing that space.
I believe it is, yes.
'Cause, correct me if I'm wrong, it used to be Bank of Montreal that was in, they had the space that's now the ATM for TV. And then Latco took over the bank space when they vacated. So it's the former bank vault.
Yeah.
Okay. So those are my questions, thank you.
Bruce?
I have no questions, thank you.
So your total assessed value that you're requesting is 3,479? 3.479?
3,479,000.
Correct, thank you. That's all my questions.
Just have one question. In regards to the Latco space,
Yes.
on the previous property, you had given a lease value of $15 a square
Indeed, yeah.
foot, and this one is 14.
Yeah.
So what is meriting the dollar
Yeah,
less?
you know, I believe I would have actually just, if you recall, the contract rent recorded on the IE that was included in the income calculations was $14. That is obviously affiliates. So as I mentioned to Mr. Taylor, I wouldn't object to using 15 or even 16, because this is a smaller space too. Right, the Latco space in the mall right next door was closer to 9,000 feet. So
Right.
I would agree there's an inconsistency there, and if you bumped it by $2, it would add about, call it 4,000 to the potential income. That makes sense.
Same finishings?
I actually have not been in this office. I don't know what I expect.
Okay. We'll just redirect to Mr. Taylor. Were you inside this Latco space?
Not past the front reception area. Again, that's why I had the question about the vault, if it was
Right.
connected to the other
I believe it
space.
is.
Yeah.
I haven't been in this office.
Okay. Thank you. Any wish for a summation on this property? Thank you, gentlemen. And I think we are going to just pause here for a moment to find out. I'm going to call this hearing back to order. We are going to start with our next property, 50 Sage Creek Boulevard. Mr. Taylor, whenever you are ready.
So we have file number 19-2651. Roll number 0609315800 for 50 Sage Creek Boulevard, also known as the Sage Creek Village Center. That's the owner also. Proposed 2020 reassessment valuation, assessment value is $36,908,000. Neighborhood shopping center here, we have 12 buildings on site, 23 different units. Construction started in 2011 with the Tim Hortons that's located on the corner of Lajimodi and Sage Creek Boulevard, with the other buildings being phased in over time until 2015. We have a leasable area today of 113,749 square feet and a land to building ratio of 4.75 to 1. Opening page 2, we see their compliance with a request from income and expense information, and the subject property leases, listed below. I don't believe that the subject sale that's listed on page 2 is anything other than when it was vacant and just subdivided by the owner. So yeah, the subject lease is below there, we can see. For some of the occupancies on site, page 3 is just some rental comparables to show some rental comparables for larger format Sobeys store, and then some other the smaller, newer ones, especially the North Town Road being a Bridgewater development, that has to save on foods rent there, and some of their other commercial, retail space there. Page 5 and page 7 are effectively the Shell gas bar here at the Sage Creek Village is 2,250 square feet for the convenience store there. Yeah, model driven rent of $37.01. Yeah, and the capitalization rate for the other parameters you can see in front of you is 6.15% for the cap rate there. Additional building value again being the storage tanks, the canopy, and the pumps being $498,000. And then page 7 is the car wash also. Got a model driven rent of $10.50 a square foot. And a cap rate of 5.4% for that. But the bulk of the value here is under the neighborhood shopping center stream. So we have total leasable area here of 110,127 square feet. Again, all the rental rates you see above are model driven. Vacancy rate for neighborhood shopping centers is 4%. Unrecoverable expenses being 2% again. Shortfall being 8% again. And the capitalization rate this time being 7.15%. I've added an additional land value below, again, similar to what we've talked about before. This is subjective to my own, and I'll get into that in a bit. Flipping to page 9 for the capitalization rates. Again, we don't have capitalization rates for the gas stations or for the car washes. But looking at the neighborhood shopping center row we have here, we see that the subject property falls in the 20th percentile, so the other side of the bell curve being 7.15%, being that it is a newer, more prototypical neighborhood shopping center than what we looked at earlier today. It's assigned the rental, or sorry, the capitalization rate is 7.15%. Page 11 has the aerial photographs of the subject property. You see the Sobeys is the larger building at the bottom part of the page that backs onto residential. And then right beside that is the Shoppers Drug Mart. Beside the Shoppers Drug Mart is the only unoccupied rental unit. So I'll point it out on this page as being here. Is the only unfinished, unoccupied, but it's been there since I believe 2013. Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong. I've been into all the other spaces. I went to the Sobeys and the Shell on the weekend. I used to live in Sage Creek for a number of years too, so yeah, I've been to all the different spaces, the restaurants, the liquor commission. We have the site plan listed over on page 13. Which will just explain to you what is at each building there, since we have a number of buildings in the space. And like I said, number 17, the one in the bottom, on the southeast corner, is the only vacant space available at the subject property. Page 14 starts with the income and expense questionnaire. Page 16 shows the rent roll. Couple things to look at here is that the Sobeys, there's two different line items for Sobeys here. I've never personally seen either amount here, but understand from dealing with previous appeals with Altus, not with Carey, sorry. That they're land leases, and it's indicated that they're both the same land lease for the space. But if you're using that 38,785 square feet, it works out to $11 a square foot for the land. And then Similarly, I believe I'm not sure if the shell's on here or not. But in my dealings with this property previously and just being there as often as I am, flipping back to page 11, or I guess maybe page 21 is a better page to flip to. Just for the excess land area, my dealings with this is that Sobeys has a vision that they might eventually expand and, sorry, looking for the word. Put addition on their store. Thanks for waiting. That will cover that square and go right out towards the road, towards Lashmodier. That's what I've been told previously by the owner's representatives. For today, again, I didn't apply for an increase for the property, but that's all under Sobeys land lease currently, from what I understand. Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong. But essentially I used the same land comparables we've looked at already today, use that area there, which I roughly calculated to be 175 feet by 120 feet, just to give them space for the front for the road and then to the back for the houses, you know, the appropriate allowances. Yeah, and applied that, sorry, flipping through all these pages. And flipping over to page 6. So that excess or additional land, I put 2,100 or 21,000 square feet, and I used $50 a square foot for the smaller area, which adds roughly $1 million to the value of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm just gonna take a minute and get some stuff done. Mr. Grimer, questions?
Well, thanks, Madam Chair. So, Mr. Taylor, with respect to initially the excess land, then you're suggesting then that it's effectively surplus land that Sobeys may or may not use in the future for development?
Yeah, I mean, previously I've dealt with Henry on this property, and he'd said that they had just a land lease for the Sobeys. It wasn't an actual lease on the building. He was a bit fuzzy on details of who paid for the building itself, but he said that the store is laid out in the same kind of fashion. They were waiting to see whether shoppers would put in the store, which they did. But I don't know if you've been to the Pembina Highway, the South Pembina Sobeys. Roughly it would end up being the same as that if they put an addition on it.
If they would, but
If they would. But again, I'm just recognizing the value in that they're paying for that land and there's utility in that land. Or trying to.
well, except I guess, are you familiar with the fact that excess land, it has to be severable? Are you familiar with that concept? In order to have an excess land adjustment, it needs to be severable, but the way you're describing it, this wouldn't be severable because Sobeys are already from the main property, because Sobeys already has this land tied up, correct?
Yeah, they have it land leased.
Okay.
Severable in theory, it has to be. Doesn't have to be.
Right, which it isn't, I guess that's what I'm suggesting, Mr. Taylor, is it is not, based on what you're describing, it's not severable right now. Hence a bit of a concern about that, but in any event, the $50 rate then, that is based on your land sales on page 4.
Yeah. Again, we're looking at the same one we looked at previously.
Okay, now the only one that approaches that is St. Mary's Road, for a smaller parcel.
Yep.
And the other 3 being larger.
Yep.
Okay. And the 34,000, I guess, on Marion, Marion's been developed with a fast food restaurant, correct?
Yep.
Okay, so the rents, well, I think you alluded to it a few top to bottom in each of the income streams, saving the such thing except for the excess land adjustment, this is all model driven, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And Madam Chair, the 5% non-recovered asked and answered. Please and thank you. And so again, Mr. Taylor, similar to some of the previous questioning on one of the other properties, for the, going into your pages 5 and 7, this is the gas kiosk, it's a shell operation with the gas station and the convenience store and the car wash. It's one integrated operation. So would you suggest that the cap rate, it might be appropriate to have the same cap rate for those two income streams as for the main center?
Yep, that's, I'm gonna always be consistent.
Madam Chair, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Maurice?
No, I have no questions, thank you.
I have no question.
And I have no questions. You'd like to proceed, Mr.
Thanks,
Clerk?
Madam Chair. So the issues relate to the potential rent for the neighborhood shopping center, the cap rate, and non-recoverable, but I believe we're agreed on, actually, that's probably not the case. Yeah, the department's applied 2% vacancy to the Shell station, the gas kiosk and the vehicle car wash. I'm suggesting 4% should be applied in those cases, but we're agreeing with the 4% for the main wall. So I'll take it sort of briefly one issue at a time. Our calculation of the potential market income for the neighborhood shopping center component is located at page 9 of our brief. So as you can see there, the potential rent we calculate is $2,605,651. That includes, and Mr. Taylor's understanding and my understanding is right, that the Sobeys is on a land lease, and so we've applied a market rent for this newer store of $16.75 a square foot to that space, and the remainder of the rents as shown there on the various units, including a $24 rate to the vacant unit 701. So we applied $24 there, and the remaining rents as shown on that chart will be coming at $2,605,651, agreeing with the 4% vacancy allowance for this component and a shortfall rate. And then turning to page 10, pardon me, non-recovered expenses, for the reasons previously submitted, we're asking the board to restore the non-recoverable 5% allowance, and the capitalization rate, this is 7.15%, which again, pardon me, represents a significant reduction from the rate of 7.5% that was applied with the 2018 assessment, and we're, for the reasons that we've presented in our cap rate study and the lack of compression and the environment in which this property is operating, the retail environment, we're suggesting no compression in this case, and the rate should stay at 7.5% for both, for actually all of the income streams, this one along with the income stream for the car wash and the gas kiosk. So we're suggesting 7.5%, reflecting zero compression. And then turning to page 11, our valuation for the main component, neighborhood shopping center, using the potential rent of $2,605,651 and running that through using 4% vacancy and the remaining parameters and a 7.5% cap rate, comes in at $30,541,300. And I'm just going to skip ahead briefly to the next income stream on page 13. This is the Shell station, the actual gas kiosks and small retail store. The potential rent that we've applied is the same as the departments. The vacancy we've applied is 4% to be consistent with the mall as a whole rather than 2% suggested by the assessor. And again, pardon me, the cap rate we're suggesting is 7.50%, consistent with our request for the main center. And then the adjustments, we're agreeing with the adjustment of $498,000 for pumps, tanks, and canopies. So we come in at a value of $1,482,000 for that component. And skipping ahead once again to page 15. This is our valuation, I mean, it's one economic unit, the Shell station, but because it was split out by the department, we've also split out the car wash building. That potential rent is $14,406, the same as the department's, and then we again applied 4% vacancy and a 7.5 cap, so we come in for that component at $168,200 rounded. So then going to page 16 for the summary of the entire valuation. And if the board wanted to cross-reference Mr. Taylor's brief on page 8 and our materials at page 16, that shows the layout for the entire property and the respective positions. So our potential net market income that we've applied is $2,703,330, and applying the 4% vacancy rate and then the 5% for non-recoverables and 2% for other and shortfall and capping it at 7.5%, we come in at $31,694,000, call it, and an adjustment for pumps, tanks, canopies of $498,000. So our value, requested value is $32,191,580, rounded to $32,192,000. That was what we submitted in our brief. Now, just for the board's reference, ask the board and Mr. Taylor to turn to page 20. So this was the initial valuation that the department had on it, and it shows basically the same valuation for me that Mr. Taylor's presented, save and except for the excess land calculation. So that is an additional figure, but so when we made our original submissions, we were not contemplating the excess land in our valuation, but contrary to, or not contrary to, but as opposed to our position very strongly on the previous property in Lakewood, I believe Mr. Taylor's point is well received as to the potential for some excess land adjustment. The rebuttal evidence that I'm filing relates more to quantum. I guess I'm assuming one of the criteria for an excess land adjustment, and it's actually in the article, I didn't submit the article with this rebuttal, it was in the previous rebuttal that I submitted for the Lakewood property. The appraisal journal talks about the fact that it has to, in order to truly be excess, it has to be severable, and in this case, I don't believe it is severable, so there's some debate about whether this should even be included as excess land. But having said that, I looked at what Mr. Taylor had done, and I was also at the site yesterday and looked through that. And at least in theory, if Sobeys were to plan to expand, they would have the land to do it. So it's almost like it's more of a surplus land issue rather than excess, but put it this way, if the board were inclined to make an adjustment, I guess my concern with Mr. Taylor's rate of $50 a square foot, I don't have a concern with his calculation of the amount of excess land, but I'd suggest, based on my rebuttal on page 2, I've listed 4 sales there ranging from $28.62 a foot up to $44 a foot, call it, for sales in 2014 and 3 in 2016. And given the very limited, this land is, if nothing else, it's burdened by an encumbrance, and it's very limited as to how it might be used as excess land, if and only if Sobeys decides to pursue it. But assuming that they would, the land rate I'm suggesting would be $32.50 a square foot, which would result, if the board were so inclined, in an excess land value of $682,500. So I'm asking the board this afternoon to consider that as my alternate request, if the board is inclined, in the present circumstances, to add for excess land. I'm suggesting it should be no more than $683,000, which would then, bring my total request to $32,874,000. So that is as an alternate request. I'm not entirely, I think Mr. Taylor has a point, but I'm not entirely convinced that it's truly excess because it's not severable. But I am willing to put that alternate request in for the board's consideration and just ask that they make a determination based on all of the evidence. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Should I ask the rebuttal or the other question?
You can ask both.
Both? Okay. Not sure. Guess it's just a yes or no question. So it's,
You don't know me well, then I never give yes or no answer.
yeah. So with respect to the land lease for Sobeys, it did expire October of the reference date. It says
Let
on
me
the.
make sure I get this, I have the same.
Sorry,
information as you.
October of the reference year, so October 2018.
Yes.
Do you know if it's been renewed or what's happened with it? I
Um,
did find
actually,
the amount for it later on in the.
Yeah, I believe it is. So if you go to our page 27, and this is the same rental that you had submitted, Mr. Taylor, but I believe actually,
Yeah, the other page too.
what's that?
You have an extra page on this.
So at my page 27, I think the lease has been renewed to 2033.
No, it's the top amount was just for the excess. In,
Oh, the
again,
bare,
in what
the
I-
bare land lease,
the
yes.
yeah, the one that has 0 square footage on it.
Yeah.
That was only until October 24th of 18. At least that's what I understood from Henry, was that was just for that parcel of green space.
Okay.
So I wasn't sure if that.
I'm not aware if that has been renewed.
Okay. That was it for my questions.
Thank you. Bruce, questions?
No, I think I'm okay. I'm going to the stuff
Like a gymnast that day.
here. Well, it's quite a gymnastic to go through all these figures all the time.
I have no question.
And I have no questions. Any wish for a summation from either party?
Well, thank you.
Are we out of water here?
No?
Doesn't look like there's any cups, but I'll go see if they've got extra in one of the rooms.
Thank you. Move on to Pembina. 2866.
Yep, so file number 19-2650 is for roll number 03060713500866 Pembina Highway. The proposed 2020 assessed value is $6,013,000. Two buildings on site, kind of an L-shaped strip, and then another little, used to be a freestanding restaurant that's since been reconfigured. So 14 rental units in total. It was built in 1987. And the land to building ratio is 3.43 to 1. Page 2, we see that they've been compliant in sending in manufacturing expense questionnaires, at least for 2016 and 2017. And we have the subject property lease is listed below. Sorry, just lost my papers there. Page 3 has some rental comparables. Tried to stick on Pembina Highway here since there's lots of retail stuff on Pembina Highway. Mixture of new and old. Again, just looking for similar types of properties on Pembina. Rents range from $19 a square foot up to $29.50 a square foot. Page 4, we only have one income stream to deal with for this property, which is nice. Shows all model-driven rental rates. Total leasable area of 21,771. Standard vacancy rate for neighborhood shopping centers of 4%. Unrecoverable expenses of 2%. Again, neighborhood shopping center shortfall rate of $8 a square foot, and the cap rate being 7.3%, which is in the 80th percentile for our cap rates listed on page 5. Giving a total value of $6,013,000. Page 7 just shows aerial photographs of the subject property. So at the bottom of page 7, we just see there's the L-shaped building, 2866, and then 2870 is the one that used to be the, I think it was called Michael C. Fina's restaurant. So like a steakhouse.
Used to be a Pony Corral before that.
One crowd before that. Now they have a Mary Brown's Chicken Taters, Domino's, and another rental unit in there, and they've added a drive-through to the space. Since those tenants have gone in. Would also take note too, in the building that's 2866, I believe that the Taekwondo place that's listed on page 2 at a rent of $6.25 has very limited access. I think it's in the heel, they call, of the strip, so that's why it's getting the $6 rent there. After that, we just again have the income expense questionnaire for 2017 and the city's printout on capitalization rates. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions?
Just a couple, actually. Mr. Taylor stole my thunder, because he's exactly right. Mr. Taylor, then, on your page 4, so these are model-driven rents top to bottom.
Top to bottom, yeah.
And the fourth from the bottom, the 3872, then that's the Taekwondo space, correct?
I believe so, yeah.
And the actual, or put it this way, were you aware that that space, which is in fact elbow space, had been vacant for several years prior to the Taekwondo moving in?
No, I wasn't aware of that.
Okay, and we can agree, based on your review, that what was finally secured for that elbow space was 6 1/4 from the Taekwondo space, correct?
Yeah, that's what they're reporting as their rent.
Okay, and then again, the remainder, 4%, 2 and 7.3, that's all one?
Yep.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Please have questions asked and answered for non-recoverables for Mr. Taylor, and that's it.
Thank you. Maurice?
No questions, thank you.
I have no questions.
So previously you had stated that the Taekwondo at 625 was because it was of its location within the mall?
Yep.
And that's not the case?
That's the case. That's why they got 625, 675. I don't remember. They got
Okay, so I'm just saying,
nominal
Mr.
rent.
Reimer just said that because it had a vacancy for over a number of years. But you
Yeah,
weren't aware of
I'm
that.
not aware of that at all. No. I'm aware that similar problems exist in other, there's similar type properties with the heel having a lesser rental rate. I've never seen one at 625 though before, but I'm aware that it does sometimes to go vacant for a long time. It's hard to find tenants for those spaces.
On page 8 of your brief, your NOI is hard to read, or whoever wrote this.
Oh, like on the mailer itself?
Yeah.
I believe it is 147,418 is what they're reporting as their NOI. Because they have reported a total income of 533,816 on line 122 at the bottom left corner. And then just going through all the expenses, I'm guessing it'd be a negative 147,418, but I don't see a minus sign or anything, because their total expenses looks like 681,234.
That would indeed be negative.
Yeah. Because they have $4,000 in maintenance and repair for 2017. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with the new CRUs or whatever in 2017, because it would have been in around that time that they put up the Mary Browns and the new CRUs, but.
Was that a question?
I can't explain why the maintenance and repair is so high, essentially.
No more questions?
All right.
To proceed.
I think Mr. Taylor is correct that so just for a moment, staying on the department's page 8, that is a negative 147,418, and yeah, that 402,000, that will relate to that sort of redevelopment of that, what used to be a standalone restaurant there. So, pardon me, if you take that out of the equation, then the NOI would be closer to sort of 270,000, if you take that maintenance and repair expense out of the equation. But it actually, in this particular case, Madam Chair, it comes down to reasonably simple suggestions. If I could ask the board to have page 4 of Mr. Taylor's brief and then our page 10 open. And while you have those 2 pages open, I will explain that elbow space, because that's the crux of the entire issue relating to potential market rent. That elbow space had been, and it's exactly as Mr. Taylor describes. You got no retail tenant is going to take it. It's a typical retail tenant. It's a truly, I guess Mr. Taylor called it the heel of the building. I call it the elbow of the building. So it's got no exposure within the building, and it's all sort of back in the corner. That space had been vacant for 5 years. Finally, after significant efforts, and this is, I agree with Mr. Taylor's comments, the elbow space or heel space is exceptionally difficult to lease and to keep leased. This is the 3rd one I've seen. The other 2, or at least one of the other 2, was leased in a similar situation by a music, not a music store, but a music lessons. You know what I'm talking about in Britannica?
Yeah.
So it's a case where you have to have a specific user that's sort of straying off the normal retail path, and those users are not typically paying top dollar, and they're not looking for street or exposure. And in this case, after 5 years of searching, finding this taekwondo tenancy did come in, and they came in at a net lease rate of 6.25 under the April 2016 lease. So please bear in mind when you're looking at this property in your deliberations that this is a property that, or a premise that had been chronically vacant, and there's a reason for it because it's elbow space, and the owners certainly did the very best they could at getting 6.25 net, and after all those years of vacancy, they were happy to get it. So when one looks at my page 10 and the assessor's page 4, the difference, the department's model-driven rent is $473,941. My potential rent there is $459, and that difference is basically exclusively, you can boil it down to the market rent that one would apply to the elbow space. I've applied the 6.25 that the taekwondo was finally agreed to pay. The department's model rent is much higher, and that accounts for, as I say, the difference in our potential rents. Then when you work it through, the 4% allowance we're in agreement with, of course, the non-recovered for the reasons given, we're asking the board to restore that. And we are asking the board to apply a cap rate of 7.5%, which is again consistent with the cap rate applied with the 2018 assessment, and our submission is to the economic climate and the zero compression on cap rate. We're asking for 7.5% in this case, to come in at a value of $5,374,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Question, because we touched on Britannica and that they have that Topper Music School.
Yes, that's the one, yes.
And you guys used that property, if I'm not mistaken, in your cap rate evaluation.
Yep.
That's the only one I can really refer to right now, but I don't know which are the units in your cap rate analysis. Like, is it the one you guys applied $10 a square foot to?
I've already put the study away, Ms. Ron.
It would be helpful to have more heel or elbow comparables to look at.
Yeah, that's the only one in our study that I'm aware of. And it would be the low one, yeah, it's that $10.
It's the $10,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so I feel like generally you wouldn't disagree that the 625 might be a bit on the low end just because of the vacant history.
No, because, well, that begs the very question, I guess, Mr. Taylor, is after 5 years of trying, they finally got the guy in there to pay 6.25.
Yeah.
So if they're applying a higher rate, then I'd want to bump on the vacancy.
That was my question.
Maurice?
No questions, thank you.
I have no question.
And I have no questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Michelle, did Dave give you back that brief?
Yeah, and I made him a copy.
Oh, you made him a copy, so I don't need to send him one? Okay, thank you.
And we'll move on to 230 Dalhousie Drive.
Mr. Chair, do you have a minute?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, may I just quick
That's
update
all.
briefly?
Sure. Would you like to begin?
Yep. So, file number 19-1805, for roll number 0304 509 5000, 230 Dalhousie Drive. We have, institutional, residential, and commercial here on this property for a total proposed 2020 assessed value of $2.5 million. The recommendation today to reduce the value down to $2,275,000, just on adjusting some of the rental income.
Breakdown.
Yep.
So the residential portion remains unchanged. The institutional changes from the $1,129,000 to $1,029,000. And the commercial portion changes from $1,239,000 to $1,114,000.
What was the residential one again?
Same.
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 And just to confirm, this is based on the adjustment of the rental income?
Correct.
We're in
And
agreement?
your agreement?
Yes.
This brings us to our last property of 2716 Pembina Highway.
They're all there. So file number is 19-2566 0304 265 0000. The roll number for 2716 Pembina Highway. The proposed 2020 assessment value is $3,879,000. We have it listed as a neighborhood shopping center with 2 buildings on site and 5 premises there in total. Built between 1989 and 1994. The planned gross leasable area are both 15,294, but we're using a leasable area of 15,346. So we'll see where that extra 50 square feet takes us here. We did receive income and expense questionnaires, but they're for some reason not listed on page 2. Rental comparables on page 3 again, other retail rents along Pembina Highway, just like we've looked at previously, right, ranging from $16.50 up to a high of $29.50 a square foot for some newer properties. Page 4. So again, this has been valued as a neighborhood shopping center, even though it's, there's not that many tenancies here. We do have some kind of mixed use though with some more auto, we got Fountain Tire and Speedy Auto Glass in here along with some restaurants as well, so. We have model driven rents on page 4. And, sorry, we used standard vacancy for neighborhood shopping centers of 4%, unrecoverable expenses being again 2%, shortfall of $8 a square foot. And the cap rate being 7.3%, which again is in the 80th percentile on page 5 for neighborhood shopping centers. You can see on page 7 that the Fountain Tire is really its own building there, whereas the secondary building has the Trosabi, the Sherwin-Williams Paints, Little Caesars, and Speedy Auto Glass. Yeah, right there on the corner of Dalhousie and Puna Highway. Page 8 through 11, oh sorry, is the rent rolls, sorry. And then the last couple pages are just again the city of Winnipeg's assessment, or sorry, their cap rate evidence or addendum. Thank you.
Questions, Mr. Ryan?
Model driven top to bottom, correct?
Yeah, I did forget to add one thing to it, to my presentation. It was just that the Little Caesars rent that we've included here expired the day before the reference date, but we're including that as part of the submission. Yes, model driven top to bottom.
Thank you. Thanks, Madam Chair, those are my questions.
Thank you. Maurice?
No questions, thank you.
I have no question.
I just have one. This is considered a neighborhood shopping center,
Correct.
and there's five places of business on this property,
Correct.
so why isn't it a strip mall?
I have that marked down. It was a judgment call for me to not change it before the hearing like I did similarly with other properties. We have two buildings, it's less of a strip in orientation. There's much more parking on this site than there was. There is typically, usually strip malls, you don't have as high land building ratio as you have here. I have done some analysis on strip malls versus neighborhood shopping centers. Usually they don't go to the 4.32 to 1 like the subject property has. So that's why I didn't change it to a strip mall. But certainly size-wise, you could make the argument if you chose to, but I would not agree.
Okay, thank you. Would you like to proceed?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So the issues in this case are threefold. The potential rent, we are coming in a little bit lower based on the performance of the property as of the reference date. Not much, mind you, but a little bit. And the non-recovered, 5% and cap rate. So if I could ask the board, while keeping Mr. Taylor's brief at page 4 open, and then our brief at page 9. So the rents shown there, and I've got the detailed chart with the lease dates on page 7, but the rents shown on that page, including though, it's interesting, the Little Caesars Pizza, that is the rate that expired on March 31st of 18. And I didn't look ahead to the the end of calendar year 18 questionnaire to see if it had been renewed, so I'm still using that rate. But using that rate in the remainder of the rents in place, we come in at a total potential net rent of $300,452, so we're only off by about $6,000 relative to the department's model driven rents. Suggests that based on the performance, though, $300,452 is appropriate. And then the bigger issue actually relates to the non-recoverables at 5%, and for the reasons given, I'd ask that the 5% non-recoverable allowance be restored, and the 7.5% cap, which again, it represents, I'm not very sure of this, but I believe it represents zero compression from the previous cycle. Actually, it represents a 25-point compression. In the previous cycle, the cap rate applied was 7.75%, and we have now are now suggesting a rate of 7.5%. So 25 basis point compression from 2018 assessment, and that comes in at the value of $3,511,000. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Just a couple yes or no questions. So your page 7, where you have your potential market rent.
Yes.
So the Fountain Tower, they were the original occupants of Unit B, correct?
Yes,
They've been there since it was built
Yeah.
in '89.
Yeah.
And then really just Unit A1 and A2, that used to be the Blockbuster Video, and now it's those two.
Yeah. Yeah.
But Little Caesars Pizza and Speedy Auto, they've been there since the '90s too.
I'm less familiar with that unit, but I believe you if that's what you're suggesting.
Okay, those are all my questions. Just curiosity questions.
Questions?
No, thanks.
No question.
No questions.
Thank you all very much for your time.
Thank you for your time.
We got through it, now we gotta work.